I'd like to call this meeting to order. Can we get the roll call, please?
I'll do my best. Okay, Dr. Bofi.
Present.
Dr. Bofi is present. Mr. Davis.
Present.
Mr. Davis is present. Ms. Edmonston. Ms. Edmonston is not present. Mr. Garvey. Mr. Garvey is present. Ms. Holloway.
Present.
Ms. Holloway is present. Dr. Jones.
Present.
Dr. Jones is present. Ms. Lewis.
Present.
Ms. Lewis is present. Ms. Orange Jones.
Present.
Ms. Orange Jones is present. Mr. Rock.
Present.
Mr. Rock is present. Dr. Thomason.
Present.
Dr. Thomason is present. Ms. Vautier.
Here.
Ms. Vautier is present. Ms. Heredia.
Present.
Ms. Heredia is present. You have a quorum.
Thank you. What's our first item?
We're going to take the items out of order. Okay. We'll clear the consent item first. Your consent agenda is ready for your approval, adding item 3.3.
Is there a motion? Thank you, Dr. Jones.
Second.
Is there a second? Thank you, Ms. Holloway. Is there any objection? Hearing none, motion carries. What's our next item?
We're going to take an item out of order right now. Your next item is on page 213, item 5.1, consideration of recognition of Ms. Maria Heredia, 2015-2016 Student Representative for the BESE Academic Goals and Instructional Improvement Committee, and introduction of Mr. Andrew Benoit Naquin, 2016-2017 Student Representative. The recommendation is to receive.
Is there a motion? So moved by Ms. Holloway, second by Ms. Orange Jones. We're going to go ahead and turn this over to Ms. Orange Jones, since she is the BESE member from Ms. Heredia's district.
Okay, so Maria, you have been...
Ms. Orange Jones, you have to be really, really close to the mic.
Okay, I will speak up. I was going to say, Maria, you have been such an extraordinary BESE student representative. You are graceful under pressure. You are convicted. You are courageous on the issues you care about. You have represented your fellow peers across this state so well and so admirably. And I think I speak for our entire board when I say that we are so proud of you. And your presence on this board will be seriously missed. While serving on this board, what many of us may not also recognize is that Maria has also successfully completed 4 AP classes. This year alone is going to be the valedictorian of her senior class at Grace King High School in Jefferson Parish. Will be attending Williams College on a full scholarship this fall. And I personally have loved getting to know you. You know that. We all have just, I think, benefited so much from your perspective. And I hope that you have enjoyed your service and time on this board as much as we've enjoyed having you. So congratulations on this achievement and getting to this point. And with that, I will open it to other board members who may want to comment.
Well, I'm glad that Ms. Orange Jones was able to give you guys the background on Maria, because we have watched her over the course of the year. But I realize for some new members, you're just getting to know her, and then you're going to get to know our new member today as well, our new student member. So for the new board members, we have a student representative from the Louisiana Association of Student Councils. And each year over at the annual conference, Louisiana Association of Student Councils chooses a student member to sit on BESE, and they sit on this committee to provide input. So just to give you all a background of where we are. So Maria, you make us proud. I don't think I can add anything to what Ms. Orange Jones says other than to reinforce the fact that you make us proud, and we look forward to what you're going to go on to contribute to our great state. So thank you so much for your service. And
So, Maria,
Before you introduce our new student representative, who I've enjoyed sitting next to already, we just wanted the opportunity to give you a token of our appreciation, and we'd also like to take a photo with you, along with our board chair, our superintendent, and anyone else, and Holly, anyone else who'd like to join us.
Well, thank you, Ms. Orange Jones.
Madam Chairman, as we're coming back, I might just punctuate, just to fully capture, for those who haven't read it yet, I just read the 2016 U.S. News World Report rankings of colleges, and Williams is in the colleges category. It's not in the universities category. So it would be like Centenary would be in that category, for example. Williams is the #1 rated college in the United States. So that is no small thing to receive a full ride. It's not, having gotten to know you, it's not surprising, but it's no small feat.
No.
Thank you to the board members. You guys have been, especially Mr. Garvey, Mr. White, Ms. Jones, Ms. Bofi, for being such great mentors this past year. Thank you to the Louisiana Association of Student Councils for giving me this opportunity. My mother and my student council advisors who are watching. It has been a tremendous honor to serve on this board, and it's only been a small blimp in my senior year, but it has made such a huge impact. And even though the meetings are only once a month, and sometimes they're not every month, I have truly enjoyed coming to every single meeting. I am excited to leave this token, to leave this for Andrew. This past summer, I got to spend 3 weeks with him, and I am most definitely sure that he will be an amazing student representative. And I'm leaving this in capable hands, and I'm excited for that. The board and what you guys have done for the state, I commend you, and I encourage you to continue striving for a better education for our state. Thank you.
Andrew, would you like to introduce your family?
I have my mom right here in the blue dress. Stand up. My sister sitting next to her. My grandparents, my dad, Patty and Raymond Mendoza. My dad, Dan Knockin, and Mr. Phil, Miss David, and Mr. Pasqua over there in the middle.
Well, we are happy to have a student representative, and we're happy today to have two. So we look forward to your contributions to the meeting, and we're excited that you're getting your sister ready so she can follow in your footsteps later on.
She's getting there.
Yes, Ms. Holloway.
Yes, I'm quite privileged today to be here with Andrew, not only because he is our student council rep, he is from District 3, and he is from Thibodaux, so he's from my area, so he might be riding with me someday. But anyway, no, we're really excited about him being here, and I want to commend LaFouche, and especially Beth David. Beth, I think we've had 10, or how many from LaFouche that has served in this capacity? 9 from Thibodaux High, and there's Mr. Frank Pasqua. That is amazing throughout these years. Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Andrew, I wouldn't ride with her. She has to stay longer than you do. Is there any other word from board members? All right, what's our next item?
Your next item is on page 1. Item 2.1, consideration of a report on the status of elementary music education in Louisiana. A PowerPoint deck has been distributed. The department recommendation is to receive.
Is there a motion to receive?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Rock. Ms. Stomps?
Hey, while they're getting the PowerPoint up, I'll go ahead and start talking. I am so excited to be here this evening to kind of fill you in on the progress that we've made. When I spoke in January, there's a lot of unknowns when we were looking at music education in our state. And right now we have so much more information that I would like to share with you this evening. Starting off with just looking at the current state regulations, the Louisiana Department of Education has been such a wonderful asset for me to go back and see what are our current standards, where have they come from, and where are we going to go with them next. So you can see in 2004, we adopted our current music and art standards. I actually use these standards for my lesson plans each week. In 2007, there was a law passed asking us to create a arts curriculum, but there was no funding that was allocated to the Department of Education for this. So the Department of Education actually contributed $191,000 to create this art curriculum. And I know several of my music colleagues served on it. I did attend professional development meetings where it was introduced and talked about. At the same time, I was looking at BESE regulations. We have the Bulletin 741, which requires 120 arts education minutes in a week, 60 with the visual arts and 60 with the performing arts. So that's our current state of our policies between the legislation and the BESE. Then the Department of Education has helped with creating a survey, and they asked just 4 simple questions for each district. Does your district offer music education? How many minutes per week, is it provided? Are there certified music teachers employed, and do you use that state music curriculum? I'm excited right now looking at, we have had 55 districts that have responded at this time. 50 do offer music education. We have 521 certified music educators at this time. But out of the 50 districts that offer music education, 33% meet or exceed the minimum state requirement. Again, that was at 60 minutes. So we've got 66% of the districts meeting our requirements. 34% use the state curriculum at this time. So we're going to keep the survey open because not every district has responded. So we want to make sure we have every district covered so that we can understand exactly the whole state's response. So with this new information that we've received, we are working on creating a working group of representatives that can assist with an analysis of this information and identification of the needs and best practices. And we want to give recommendations to improve music education for Louisiana as we move forward. So at this time, the Department of Education, I've asked music colleagues, we've contacted school superintendents. So we've identified about 30 educators to represent our working group. This includes music teachers, school and district administrators, higher ed professionals. We have representatives from different state music organizations. We've also have representatives from the culture, recreation, and tourism that will be meeting to work on this objective. Right now, I'm sorry, I forgot to flip to the next one. Right now, we're going to try to limit the number down to 20. So that's one of our process right now, going through and identifying the best possible candidates for this working group. Especially, we want to make sure we're covering all the demographics and all the different regions, because as I was going through this, I realized that there are parts of the state that I really don't have information about. So we need representatives from those areas to help fill in those gaps for me. We are planning to meet 3 times before June. And right now our objectives are to report back to you a better understanding of this information, including an in-depth analysis of our needs and best practices. And we want to make recommendations to the board for improving Louisiana music education for our students, not just for the 2016 and 17 school year, but beyond that. With this initiative, I would like to move forward and invite you to participate in our gatherings. We will keep you posted on all the meetings and the agendas, and please join us at any time. And we're going to keep you updated on the progress like today. And I also want to report real quickly that I did get to meet with our First Lady yesterday, who is also a music educator. So it was a wonderful time to have a conversation with her. And she's also looking right now at music education in the state. And she specifically said her goal is to put Louisiana on the map, that we really and truly should be the representative of music education because of our culture, our history. So we are working on the same goals, and she's going to be a wonderful asset and resource, I think, as we move forward with this. So thank you for the time tonight, and thank you for all the help the Louisiana Department of Education staff has provided me for all this process. Thank you.
Are there any comments from board members?
I want to say this. You are not just taking a lead on this issue, but you were present this week, for example, at the educator preparation event, Believe and Prepare, and I just want to thank you for being so visible. I recognize this is a huge contribution of time, a lot of time in Baton Rouge, a lot of logistics and gathering volunteers for the working group and such, but I'm really looking forward to the presentation this summer and to attending those meetings. And just to thank you and to highlight for the group how I feel like Kelly is taking the Teacher of the Year role and really elevating its importance beyond where it even was. So I thank you very much.
Well, thank you. It really is a two-way street. I have to be willing, but you guys have been willing to give me this opportunity in this forum too. So definitely thank you for this partnership, I believe.
I see another Teacher of the Year smiling pretty big back there. I think she's pretty proud of you too.
Oh.
Kelly, thanks for doing, because, you know, music education we've lost in so many places, and I commend you for that, and really looking forward, and if at all possible, I'd love to attend, you know, some of the
Definitely. Thank you so much. Your feedback and information would be so valuable.
Ms. Heredia?
As a student who plays two instruments at my high school, I play cello and clarinet. I commend you on working on the music program. It truly is such an important role that plays at school. It is an option for students to truly develop in a different sense that may not be artistic or sports-wise, but going into music, it's such a valid and it's such an amazing thing to work with, and I have been honored to be blessed with the ability to play two instruments, so thank you.
I'm impressed that you played the cello and was the clarinet. Both are very difficult. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Ms. Bo.
Oh, I'm sorry. Dr. Jones?
I just wanted to tell you that I'm really amazed by you playing two instruments. I finally just learned to play the radio.
Dr. Jones?
But
it's going to be a long night with comments like that. Thank you, Ms. Stomps.
But I do support you in that, and I want you to know that I know that the bleed over for a well-rounded student and for things like mathematics, so forth, comes from that music education as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stomps. What's our next item? Is there any objection to the report? Hearing none, we received it. What's our next item?
Your next item is on page 2, item 2.2, consideration of the test irregularities report for the 2014-2015 school year. Supporting documentation has been distributed. The department recommendation is to receive.
Is there a motion to receive? Thank you, Mr. Rock. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Davis.
Thank you. Members, I wanted to take this opportunity. This is a required report that we give you every year. Can we go back to the presentation online? Thank you. This is a required report that we give you every year, and frankly, most years it is a fairly perfunctory thing where we give you a set of routine data points about issues that have gone on in schools across the state. This year, we have had an investigation underway of one particular school, in fact, of a handful of schools statewide. We announced this about a year ago. And that has prompted a couple of news stories that have prompted some questions from you, and thus I think it's important that we just give a primer on how test irregularities are addressed, and when it happens, cheating is addressed on tests. And so I wanted to walk through this presentation. This is just informational. It is on top of the report. I'll be brief because I recognize that the hours are getting smaller and smaller, but would hope to move through this presentation and give you some information. There are 3 phases, as this first slide says, of the process of keeping tests secure. There is before the test, where we train school systems and schools. There is during the test, where we monitor and collect information. And there is after the test, when we analyze the results to see if there have been any problems and any security breaches. You have a bulletin that BESE has created that outlines all of these procedures. And as anyone knows here who works in school systems, you have district test coordinators who over the last couple of decades have become very well versed in how to operate a secure testing environment in every school in the state. We train those district test coordinators, and districts do training of those coordinators as well. So there is a prepared point person in every district. During testing, both the department and local school systems do monitoring to ensure on-site compliance with all procedures. And those are oftentimes random spot checks of particular schools to make sure that they are conforming and complying with all of the policies that you have prescribed. We select schools that we monitor prior to doing so in order to ensure proper administration. And occasionally, we or district testing coordinators and monitors will identify findings of improprieties. Most often, those improprieties, and I'll discuss that in a second, are administrative issues. Somebody didn't look at the clock and there was a time slippage. A condition in a room was not followed. Instructions were not given appropriately. A student moved past where they should in a test booklet. These are common administrative issues. They are identified by monitors and they are reported to the state by rule. During the testing day, there is a hotline, there is an email address, and there are regular office hours that anybody in the state can access if they have questions regarding testing during the testing period. So there's always a place to go if there's any concern at the school level or at the district level about what is going on and the policies necessary for administering assessments. This is where the real rub comes in regarding any potential bad actors, however. And that is that on the back end, when the state and its testing vendor receive the results, there are three types of analyses performed to determine whether or not there has been any further administrative issues or whether there has actually been bad acting. One, we look at the sheets that students submit to see whether or not there is an abundance of or a pattern of erasures, meaning somebody has changed the answers. Second, we look for plagiarism and whether or not there are answers that are shared from one student to the next or from online materials to the answer sheet. And three, we look at unusual gains, meaning statistically highly improbable changes in a given school or a given class or a given student's performance. And oftentimes we'll look for patterns among these three types of analyses, where you see unusual gains and plagiarism, or unusual gains and erasures. You have cause for some suspicion, and at least cause for an investigation. If there is any irregularity, meaning anything that a monitor finds or anything that is turned up in an analysis, a district must, by your rules, complete its own investigation and submit the findings of that investigation to the Department of Education. The Department of Education also voids all of those test results immediately. So there will be a fair number of results that will not be counted in the end of year results because they've been invalidated right off the bat. Whether it was intentional problems or unintentional problems, they are simply invalidated. Our administration, however, has started taking that a step further by when there are instances where there are multiple pieces of evidence that there may have been malfeasance. Rather than having the school system do the only investigation, those instances are referred to law enforcement. And largely the reason why the instance in Orleans Parish came up recently is that there are two investigations going on currently. The school system is doing its own investigation, and the state Office of the Inspector General has an investigation going on at that school as well. I can tell you that that is not the only school across the state in which the Inspector General is actively investigating a past suspicion that there may have been cheating at the school level. I remind you that there are 1,400 schools in the state. We are committed to ensuring that any time when we think there's a reasonable probability of that happening, that the Inspector General has it. The Inspector General has brought on new investigators who are developing a specialty in this. It's a relatively small number of schools, but it's of concern every time it happens. There are ways that we are going to continue to improve the process, and I wanted to let you know what those pending changes likely, have been and likely will continue to be. We are requiring every district now to turn in a plan and we are auditing those plans on the back end. As I said, we're now reporting these investigations to the Inspector General. We've added a policy by this board that any educator that has been with a preponderance of evidence through an investigation found to have been involved in cheating automatically loses his or her license to teach and work in Louisiana schools. And there are a couple of other steps that we are taking for future years to further increase security. First, we have contracted with a nationally recognized outside expert. Cavion is the name of the organization. There's a representative from Cavion here this evening in case you have questions, to do a review and audit of our practices. Second, we are providing districts through Cavion with low-cost access to test security through that, not through Cavion, but through a statewide RFP as well, in case districts would seek a low-cost service to enhance their own security procedures. We will be able to provide them that service also. After the Cavion security audit is done, we will bring any additional recommendations from that process to you as well. I recognize it's never a pleasant topic and certainly not one for 6:30 on a Thursday evening, but I wanted to make sure that you have this detail and have a general understanding, and my colleagues in our assessment group, or the folks at Cavion are certainly ready to answer any questions you have about this issue. Thank you, Madam Chairman, for allowing me the time to speak.
Yes, Mr. Garvey.
I had a question for the superintendent. You said that when significant findings are discovered, the findings are turned over to law enforcement. Are you including the Inspector General in that phrase, law enforcement?
And that is the law enforcement to whom we have referred this, yes.
Okay. And you said that the school that was in the newspaper recently in New Orleans was not the only school that's being looked at by the Inspector General. Are the other schools in Orleans Parish, or are they outside of Orleans Parish?
There are schools across the state
that are being looked at by the Inspector General?
Yes, sir. It is certainly not limited to Orleans Parish.
Thank you.
Board members, we have a number of comment cards for this meeting, and so before I go to comment cards, and Ms. Edmonston, if you have a question for the superintendent, I'll get you before we go to comment cards. But before we do that, I'd just like to let you know people have waited a really long time to speak, so we're going to honor our traditional 3 minutes and then 5 minutes for a group. Of course, anybody who wants to waive their time is certainly welcome to do so. But I am going to ask you, board members, not to participate in a give and take. Once we are finished with the public comment, if you have questions that you would like to discuss with your fellow board members or questions that you have for the staff, we'll certainly take all the time that you need for that, but we will not be participating in a give and take. Ms. Edmonston, I'm going to go ahead and call people up and then let you ask your question while that happens. I'd like Ms. Vandergrift to come up, Mr. Hines, and Mr. Buckley. You each get 3 minutes. Ms. Edmonston?
Yes, ma'am.
Mic close, please.
Superintendent, an example of a reduced cost access to test security, would that be like an officer that would be at the school to help monitor that, or?
Correct. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Ms. Vandergrift?
Hello again. Sarah Vandergrift on behalf of LAPCS. Here just on more of an informative point of view. As an attorney that works with many schools around the state, particularly New Orleans, and also as a New Orleans resident, born and raised, I also wanted to kind of take this time as we're talking about particularly 2 schools in New Orleans that have gotten flagged for very bad acts with regards to both funding as well as testing. And I want to say, let's take a moment and actually look at how the system has worked. We're not talking about bad acts that were caught 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line. Instead, We're talking about bad acts that were caught within the first year. And we're also talking about people who did their job in terms of standing up and notifying the right people and how the right actions are taking place. So just in terms of hearing lots of negative comments about what's happening or what has happened, and rightfully so that they deserve scrutiny, I'll also like to say, let's look at, we've built a policy here or procedures that are actually working, and I think we should commend those that stood up and did the right thing when asked to.
Mr. Buckley?
Mr. Buckley, concerned citizen of New Orleans. I'm just going to go back to 2011 because you're saying that we made progress and we're doing a better job. As an educator, there was cheating going on at my school. I reported it to John White, who at the time was the Recovery School District superintendent. And I told him that cheating had took place. He wanted to know what kind of cheating, what happened. I explained it to him. He told me that he would not investigate it, but he would monitor it the next year. The next year came around, the test scores dropped from 80% back down to 46. I was fired for reporting. I was called a whistleblower. I was fired. John moved up to state superintendent of the state of Louisiana. So when we say we're making gains, I did what I was supposed to do back in 2011. I went to the superintendent of the district. That's what I was supposed to do as an educator. I got fired. Okay? So when we talk about we making improvements 4 years later, that doesn't help me. That doesn't help the kids that have been cheated in the system. Some people don't know what some testing irregularities there are. One of them is when you have kids in your classroom that are special needs kids, and they're not, accommodations are not being met. They're not being pulled out for small group testing. But when you decide to take the LEAP test or the PARC test, you pull those students out and you test them. Some schools have 3 different categories. They have a group of students that they read the test to. They have a group of students that they let take the test on their own. They have a group of students that they put in the cafeteria that they know they can't pass the test, read or not, and they just sit there. And this is going on throughout the charter schools, not all of them, but some of them. So I'm asking, monitoring. Why we have to pay people to come in and monitor? We never had a problem with all this cheating before Hurricane Katrina. You have teachers that care about what they're doing and want to see that the kids are properly educated. And when you see cheating going on as an instructor, you report it to the people that you're supposed to report it to, and then you get fired. So now in 2014, 2015, you see, I'm not going to tell anybody what's going on because I don't want to lose my job. We want to cheat because we want our test scores to be high so we can keep our job. We can keep our charter. I'm concerned about kids being properly educated in the state of Louisiana and the city of New Orleans. Crime is out of control because our kids are not being properly educated. They're being pushed through the system. All these K through 8 schools. And then when the kids get to 9th grade and 10th grade and then they realize they don't know anything.
Thank you for your comments, Mr.
They wind up
Buckley.
dropping out and start committing
Mr.
crime.
Hines?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Chris Hines. I'm with Crescent City Schools in New Orleans. I do not work with either of the charter school entities that have been the subject of these testing improprieties, but I would like to speak on that subject. And there are 2 things I'd like to say about that. The first is, I think it's important that we don't let the bad actions of a few people be used to paint with broad strokes or to characterize the entire charter school community. Those people who would act inappropriately with regards to testing are in the vast minority of people who work in charter schools. And the second thing I would like to say is that in addition to the oversight that already exists and the additional oversight that Superintendent White referred to, all of the RSD charter schools in New Orleans have come together to engage additional testing oversight by paying for an independent third-party monitor who will monitor all of the state testing in all of the RSD charter schools in New Orleans. We think this is a good best practice to maintain test integrity, and we're pleased to be rolling it out across the city. We do understand the importance of test security and of test integrity, and we are committed to maintaining it.
Thank you. Board members, do you have any questions or comments about this item? Board members, do you have any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. What's our next item?
Your next item is on page 3, item 3.1, consideration of an update report on the Accountability Commission. The department recommendation is to receive.
Is there a motion? Thank you, Dr. Jones. You can't second it, Dr. Jones. Is there a second? Thank you, Ms. Voce. We have a motion and a second. We have a comment card on this item. Ms. Barrios?
Lee Barrios, St. Tammany. I didn't know if Superintendent White was going to go over the Accountability Commission report or not, but and I understand he's not, but I still wanted to comment relative to the state's accountability system. I'm by no means an expert yet on the new Every Student Succeeds Act, but I have followed pretty closely, and I do understand some things, and I'm sure I'll be corrected if I'm incorrect, Mr. White. But local control is a big part of ESA. And part of that gives states and local school districts the authority to redevelop their own accountability systems. Okay. No longer are we under the No Child Left Behind single high-stakes standardized testing mandate. Yes, we still have to test, but it's expected that will be a part of other elements of any accountability. I'm concerned because I haven't heard anything from BESE or the state really on ESA. Ohio already has their timeline worked out so that their new accountability system is developed and presented by what I understand is the deadline of 16-17, the end of the next school year. They began in January. They have developed workforces or task forces to sit down and look at their accountability system, and I would like to see our state do that too. While testing is still required, as I said, it's by no means limited to a single high-stakes test. Accountability in Louisiana needs to be revisited and moved from a punitive to a constructive system, and one that recognizes all the elements that make up effective schools, effective educators, and successful students. The fact that states and local districts will be creating their own accountability systems and their own standards, comparability or the competitiveness between states and their standards will no longer has to be a factor. And I hope that we move toward that and that BESE gets their act together, so to speak, and starts looking. Certainly our BESE members should be aware of the provisions of ESA. Thank you.
Do board members have any questions or comments about this item? Do board members have any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. What's our next item?
Your next item is on page 17, item 3.2, consideration of an update report on the Special Education Advisory Panel. The department recommendation is to receive.
Is there a motion to receive? Thank you, Ms. Orange-Jones. A second by Ms. Holloway. Ms. Barrios?
I'm a slow bloomer, I guess. Lee Barrios, St. Tammany. I've been speaking with some special ed administrators throughout the state, and I saw that, and speaking to one issue in particular, which I saw was on the minutes of the last seat committee. So I wanted to mention that, especially for the new BESE members. Act 328 of 2011 required the Department of Education to maintain a database of all reported incidents of seclusion and physical restraint of students with exceptionalities, and to disaggregate the data for analysis by school, student age, race, ethnicity, gender, student disability where applicable, and any involved school employees. It's come to my attention that that has not been done, and this is since 2011. In fact, special ed administrators have said that they were not told by even told by LDOE how to report the data or to whom to send it. And I understand that a senator is going to be possibly opening a bill to readdress this, and those issues are going to come out. So I would encourage BESE to look into this and make sure that that the Department of Ed has followed the mandates of Act 328. Thank you.
Board members, do you have any questions or comments?
I
Ms. Edmonston?
Yes, I'm sorry. I'd just like to ensure that the public knows that we are addressing some of those special ed issues, even in the interim between the special ed advisory meetings. You know what I'm talking about? And so just to let the public know we are addressing those issues, and we will hopefully report as we meet so that the public can
Yes,
know.
and saying, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Ms. Edmonston. Ms. Holloway?
In regards to what Ms. Edmondson is saying, we have met, she and I, and we are in discussion. So we're very familiar with what you're referring to.
Board members, any other questions or comments? Is there any objection to the motion? Hearing none, motion carries. What's our next item?
Your next item is on page 26, item 4.1, consideration of revisions to policy relative to mathematics requirements for the TOPS University Core 4 and Basic Diploma Pathways, and to include technical revisions. The department recommendation is to approve A, Bulletin 741, and B, Bulletin 741 non-public as notices of intent.
Is there a motion? Thank you, Dr. Jones. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Rock. Superintendent, would you like to talk about this for the board, please?
Sure. Members, as you know, there are requirements that are in the state law regarding what courses can be designated for approval for TOPS and for essentially extra credit in the ultimately in the calculation of the TOPS GPA. These these align with our requirements for the Core 4 diploma, and to date we are a bit of an outlier as a state in that advanced placement computer science does not count as a core course in our mathematics sequence that can be counted toward TOPS. You are hearing a proposal today that we change that and make advanced placement computer science a course that could be considered for the fourth mathematics in that sequence, so that a student could earn TOPS and graduate on the Core 4 diploma having taken AP Computer Science rather than another fourth-year math. I should say generally there's been a lot of attention around the country, not just to computer science and coding efforts, but also to looking at perhaps a more practical approach to the high school math sequence. I think over the next couple of years you'll be hearing more from us about this, an integration of statistics, computer science, programming, engineering to high school mathematics, and perhaps a better way of preparing kids with more options to be college and career ready upon completing high school mathematics. So this is one small and I think relatively obvious step toward doing that, as AP Computer Science is a fantastic course with a great assessment, and I hope that you will agree and approve it. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman.
We have a comment card for Miss Susanna Showen. Thank you, Ms. Showen. Board members, do you have any questions or comments about this issue? Yes, Ms. Heredia?
So surprisingly, I ended up being one of the students that is taking currently AP Computer Science A at my high school. I'm one of 4 girls and one of 5 Hispanics in the classroom. And I'm just trying to reiterate that coding is a lot more than just simply sitting at a computer and typing in by just 1 zeros. It's a whole lot more. It's a way of problem solving. And for us, we do laboratories with Java, which is the type of coding that we use. And they give us problems, real life problems to solve, like adding numbers or finding all the prime numbers from 1 to 10,000. And this code has to be applicable to many situations. So it is an amazing opportunity for this course to be recognized by the state, because it truly is a great way for problem solving, which is what math is.
Thank you, Ms. Heredia. Board members, do you have any other comments or questions? Do you have any objection to the motion? Hearing none, motion carries. What's our next item?
Your next item is on page 38, item 4.2, consideration of revisions to Bulletin 111, the Louisiana School District and State Accountability System, relative to diplomas earned by students assessed on the Louisiana Alternative Assessment Level 1. The department recommendation is to approve as notice of intent.
I need a motion and a second. Ms. Orange-Jones moves, and there's a second by Ms. Boche. Superintendent White?
Members, you'll recall that before many of you were on the board, there was a movement to create an alternate pathway for students with disabilities to achieve a high school diploma. That law did not cover students that are classified as what we'll call Law 1 or alternate assessment because those students were continually considered ineligible to achieve a high school diploma. They could only achieve a skills certificate. That was true not just in federal law but also in state law. We pushed with BESE to make changes at the state level to allow for there to be a high school diploma that is open and eligible for students who are classified as Law 1 who can now graduate as having a high school diploma, not just a skills certificate. We also pushed for changes in the federal law to allow for consideration of such students on an alternate diploma, and that is now in the federal law. And today we're coming to you asking for the final stage, which is awarding points for such students in the high school accountability system, meaning that when a high school has a child a young man or woman who earns the Law 1 diploma, that this diploma will generate 100 points for the school and will be counted in the graduation rate of that school as such. I say that as a positive step. I think our high schools would pursue it one way or the other, but this is something that certainly gives high schools credit for good work that they're doing with these students. It now counts fully in our accountability system, and these students are treated as would any other student be in that system. Let me finally say that there is one difference, and that is that in the traditional diploma, if you graduate in 5 years, you don't get the same number of points as you do if you graduate in 4 years. For these students pursuing these diplomas, we do not have those time restrictions on the diploma. If a student earns it before they are 22, that student generates 100 points in the accountability system. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'd like to call up Lee Barrios and Sean Fleming for public comment. And Dr. Jones, you can go ahead and ask your question or give your comment now.
I'd like to ask a question of Mr. White. I noticed in that description there that it says that students who are not exited will be counted in the year that they reach the age of 22. What will they be counted? Is it do they get 100 points just because they reach 22?
They get only if they earn the diploma.
If they earn the diploma.
Yes.
Okay.
Ms. Barrios?
Lee Barrios, St. Tammany. So as I brought out earlier, as per information given to me by special ed administrators in the state and the letters that were sent to LDOE and by USDOE to Mr. White, there is no LAA1 assessment aligned to state standards. There is no new assessment, which means it's an invalid test. So my question relative to this is, it says that beginning in 2016-17, which would apply for the 2015-16 graduates, that this new system or calculation would be used. And yet it's going to be based on an invalid test that these students are taking. And I would question why you wouldn't wait until these new standards are approved and there is a new test actually created for LAA1, for Law 1, and then it would be a valid test. And the fact that over the years we've had several new sets of standards and several new tests, regular ed students have been held accountable and they have gotten new tests for those standards, and yet Law 1 has not. Thank you.
Mr. Fleming?
I would like to answer her question, if I may.
Mr. Fleming, it's your time. You can use it however you want.
I would like extra time to answer her question. Yep. I'm Sean Fleming. I'm with Louisiana Developmental Disabilities Council. I want to thank the department. I ask y'all to vote favorably on this. The entire accountability system has been biased against kids or biased against schools serving kids with disabilities. In high school, there are 4 indicators: the grad rate, there's a grad index, there's the end of course test, and the ACT scores. Kids on Law 1, first of all, it's not a Law 1 diploma, it's an alternative pathway that students on Law 1 can achieve a diploma. They're not going to take the ACT. My kids took the ACT this week. I know the kids on Law 1 in their school will not take it, so they don't count there. They're half of the high school scores on grad rates, grad rate and grad index. This is one small movement, in my opinion, and it cannot happen fast enough, and I'm grateful it's happening now, for students with disabilities to be counted more fairly, that schools serving them be counted more fairly, that schools don't get dinked for serving kids with significant disabilities. When we're talking about whether schools are succeeding in all this, the metrics we're using are not fair. What I tried to present this morning was equity in the funding. This is moving us towards equity in accountability. I really ask that y'all do it, and y'all do it backdated to last year, and I thank y'all for doing it now.
Ms. to Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
So, Superintendent, could you answer the question or the issue about the assessment and going ahead with this if we don't have the assessment updated with the standards?
Well, first of all, we have a Law 1 assessment in place.
Yes,
it's
we
the
do.
same assessment we've always used. So we have an assessment. What Ms. Barrios is saying is that the federal government has said you need to update your current standards, meaning we have told them we don't have a long-term set of traditional standards yet approved. That's a vote we're taking later this afternoon, later this evening. Once we've done that, we can craft the alternate standards. Once we've done that, we can craft the alternate assessment based on those standards. So I think it's a false, sort of creating a false dichotomy. We have the assessment in place. We may as well give the kids the opportunity. I'm not saying that we have the standards we want. I'm not saying we have the assessment we want. Please just pass the standards tonight so we can get to work on it.
So the question would be, we're not in any kind of crunch not having that in terms of the federal government.
I don't believe so. I think we should want schools to be rewarded for graduating these kids.
Well, I agree, but the letter that was sent to you by the Department of Ed, I mean, does that?
No, that is just an indication that when they give us a waiver, that they want us to know that we've got to get our standards right. And for the last 2 or 3 legislative sessions, we've had a political debate about the standards and the assessment, and we've had to go every year, year to year. What are our standards going to be? What are our assessments going to be? What the feds are saying is, when are you guys going to settle down and actually invest in the long run in one standard and one assessment? When you do that, you can create one set of alternate assessments and alternate standards.
Ms. Fauché?
I think this recommendation is a major step in the right direction. We have been asking for quite a long period of time to recognize and celebrate the achievements of our students with the most significant disabilities, and to show not only the students but their parents and their teachers and their school communities that they have value, that they count, and that they count in a very positive way, and that we need to celebrate their accomplishments. Now, having said that, as Mr. Fleming said, this indicator is 25% of the school performance score. So now we've got a positive indicator for students with significant disabilities in the index. They are exempt from the ACT testing, so that's the part of the 25%. In lieu of EOC tests, if they are not enrolled in those courses, we have the alternate assessments. Whether we should have had a new assessment last year or the year before, or whether we need to have one, I think we just need to move forward with that. We've got an assessment right now. We're going to have a better one as we continue to develop that. It's the fourth piece, the other 25% on the cohort graduation rate, where these students, unless something has changed recently, are counted as zeros. I realize this is a supposedly a national indicator, and for whatever the reasons are, these students, while we are going to count them hopefully in a very positive way in the graduation index, they will still be counted as zeros in the graduation cohort rate because they are not getting the standard diploma, which I realize, Superintendent, is a national indicator. So I would hope that we would work on that other 25% in conjunction with whatever we have to do to make sure that these students are recognized in some way within that indicator.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this is something that's going to be a discussion with the Department of Education to understand how they see the new law vis-a-vis graduation rates. But I agree with you, that's the objective that you just laid out is the right objective.
Ms. Boffi?
Yes. I had the honor of representing this board on the Special Ed Advisory Panel for my first term. And I just want to echo Mr. Fleming's remarks about this being a move towards equity. And I think of so many parents who testified to that committee and so many members who gave on their time to serve on that panel, and how we've tried to think about all of the ways that we can to establish policy and the levers we have to promote positive things for children. And so I think this is an important vote. I know we have this has been a really long day, but this is a really important vote, and I hope to see the board vote favorably on this one.
Okay, any other questions or comments from BESE members? Have we covered all the cards? Okay, we have a motion on the table. Do we have any objections to that motion? Hearing none, the motion carries. Next item.
Your next item is on page 40, item 4.3, consideration of the Louisiana K-12 content standards for English language arts and mathematics. Supporting documentation has been distributed. The department recommendation is to repeal Bulletin 1955, to repeal Bulletin 1965, and to establish Bulletin 141 and Bulletin 142, all as notices of intent.
Members, I need a motion. So I see a motion from Ms. Orange-Jones and a second from Ms. Holloway. I am going to turn this over to the superintendent for opening remarks, and then I understand that we'll have a presentation by the chairs of the committees.
Thank you, members. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Members, I'm going to try to give you a sense of what legally brought us here, what you are legally voting on, and where we legally go from here. This law that was passed last year, authored by Representative Guyman, says that the Department of Education, that BESE shall conduct a process to develop Louisiana student standards in English and math. It says that you shall adopt these standards March 2016. So I want to first be clear about that. I recognize that puts you in a difficult position given the timing, but it is true that that's what it says. It says BESE shall adopt standards. So in a sense, we don't leave this March meeting without adopting something. That is correct. Now, that being the case, those standards then become the standards that shall be taught and tested in Louisiana. That's the way the laws work. So there's been a lot of discussion about, well, what's the timeline? Is that too fast a timeline and such? And I think that's a reasonable debate to have, a reasonable discussion to have. But the laws that bring us here today say to us, you shall approve standards, and then say those standards, when they are adopted, shall be the standards that are used in our classrooms. So if there are questions raised about timing, I think those are good questions, but that's not the matter in front of you here today. Instead, I would suggest that the way we approach timing is, if we have concerns, we work with the professional associations to try to develop a consensus position about how best to manage issues of timing. And if we need changes, come back to you or go to the legislature to request those changes as appropriate. Once you approve whatever standards you are going to approve, those standards go on notice of intent as part of the Administrative Procedures Act process. They are published in a register, likely in April. Subsequent to that, they're put out for public comment. if you receive comment, you may choose to hold a hearing. Let's assume that that hearing would be held in May. Subsequent to your hearing, the legislature may hold hearings. Let's assume that hearing would be in May or June. Subsequent to that hearing, the governor may decide whether or not he wants to veto these regulations. We're not aware of the governor having ever done that before until last year Governor Jindal did that in connection with the Common Core standards and a testing issue or an accountability issue related to that. That means that on a roughly July timeline, we anticipate the governor will be seeing these standards. He is the one decision maker after you make your decision as to whether or not these standards go forward. According to the law, if he does not veto them, they become the standards that are tested and taught. If he does veto them, the current standards remain in place, and we, meaning BESE, goes through this process immediately again. And the law is very clear about that. If he vetoes them, we must commence immediately this process once again. So that's the legal framework. I'll say it again. You are required to make an adoption. There may be issues of timing raised. I think many of those issues are legitimate, but that's not what you are called on to vote on this evening. Instead, I would suggest that we take those discussions in another venue and bring any timing considerations back to you or to the legislature. Finally, once they're adopted, public comment process ensues. The governor may veto. That veto consideration we think will come up around July. If he does not, we go forward with these standards. If he does, we go back to the current standards. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Madam Chair, Dr. Bofi, BESE members, and Superintendent White. My name is Regina Sanford, and I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum Instruction in St. Tammany Parish. I have 30 years as an educator, public school educator, and 2 years working with public schools and a university collaborative. Ann?
Yes, I'm Ann Smith. I'm Elementary Curriculum Director from Vernon Parish. I began education many, many years ago. I've served as a classroom teacher, a principal, assistant principal in a pre-K 4 setting. For the past 17 years, I've worked at the district level. My primary responsibilities at the district level have been to oversee all pre-K through 6 curriculum and instruction for Vernon Parish.
My name is Charlotte Booth. I am from Rapides Parish. I was a classroom teacher for 29 years. In the past year and a half, I've served as the middle school math curriculum specialist, supporting math teachers in grades 5 through 8.
And my name is Lori Carlton. I'm from Plaquemines Parish. Prior to my position now, I served as a high school English teacher for 17 years, and I am now the coordinator of curriculum and professional development for Plaquemines Parish.
We're here tonight to update you on our work. And before we begin, it would be my utmost honor to say thank you on behalf of all of these ladies here at this table who have worked extremely hard, as well as many of the educators who are listening in tonight and in the audience. They have spent many hours here today with us. We have worked extremely hard to give you the best quality product for the Louisiana students. So let's talk about what standards actually do. Standards, as you well are aware, define what the student should know or be able to do at the end of a specific course of study, a grade level, or time period. And one of the things that we do want to designate tonight is that standards do not dictate curriculum, textbooks, or any of those decisions which are left up to the local districts. So it's very important that teachers have standards to guide the work that they do. Those are separate entities, but these standards give us comparability across the state of Louisiana, and they do set a basis for these standard assessments used. And as Superintendent White identified already, our task, we would like to assure you that we have lived up to the specific guidelines set forth by holding our meetings in each of the congressional districts, allowing them to be open to the public, making sure that we post our minutes, as well as abide by the open standards law. So let's take a look at how we did our work. First of all, there was a steering committee, and that steering committee was composed of 26 members. And those members guided the entire process and obtained feedback at periodic intervals. Secondly, the hard work was done by the content subcommittee members, and there were 29 members in each of those different areas. There was a K2 content subcommittee, a 312 ELA subcommittee, and a 312 math content subcommittee. And many of the members in the steering committee were also involved as members in the content subcommittees. It was with your great wisdom that you chose to represent the state geographically throughout all sectors of Louisiana, as well as inviting business industry, university partners, various workforce commission members, parents, and other specialty organizations to participate in this process. And it was a long and arduous process. However, I will say that we are extremely proud of the work and the professional relationships that we've developed as a result of this work. Over 80% of the committees were Louisiana educators. I think that's very important because they were closest to the students in the classroom and had firsthand experience on what students could and could not master. Secondly, we had university participation, and those members are listed, and they worked with us hand in hand to ensure the content was well aligned with post-secondary endeavors. We had specialists from the early childhood network as well as special education, because we know that not all students master things equally, so it's important that we listen and attend to all students. The Standards Review Committee, you will see the membership listed here. I chaired this Standards Steering Committee. We had K2 members, ELA members, math committee members, as well as the various organizations listed. The K2 subcommittee, you will notice that we had those specific grade level educators at the table from those three, kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, and district staff, as well as university and other professionals at the table with us, along with your appointees. The ELA committee was likewise composed into grade bands for 3-5, 6-8, and high school. Notice you have district staff, university professionals, and special appointees. The same is true as with math. We divided into grade level spans from 3 to 5, then the middle school 6 to 8, and high school, as well as district staff. So those include all of the different committee members. So let's give a brief update on the timeline. We first received our work in early summer. The public was invited to participate using an online portal. And at our very first meeting in August, we reviewed all of the online comments by a report, and then we were charged to individually go through each of those for great consideration to guide our work. And I will tell you that all of the subcommittee members did so very diligently. We met in August, and then notice we had periodic checkpoints for our work. We produced our first draft in October and then gave feedback to the steering committee in November. And early on, they provided us guidance to go back and revisit some issues. And here we are today giving you our final product. So as we drill down, you will notice on this timeline that our meetings were held throughout the state of Louisiana. Additionally, you will notice that much of the work in math required additional meetings. We were up to the task. all of our educators wanted to make sure that we attended to the work which needed to be done. So we added many other meetings to our original agenda. And if you notice, those meetings were held in Baton Rouge. We polled our members because we wanted to make sure that for convenience and logistics, we had a common meeting area, and Baton Rouge was chosen at that location. And then lastly, we met in February to present our final document and draft. So with that being said, we want to give you a brief update on the amount of time that we dedicated to this work, which was well above and beyond our day-to-day task. Because as I stated earlier, we are Louisiana educators who have a full-time job. On average, each committee member spent about 40 hours attending meetings and then 50 hours independently reviewing work outside of their school days or of their work days because we had much work to do. The four of us spent about 150 hours making sure that we were well prepared for all of our meetings and had the necessary materials that membership asked of us. So collectively, we believe, after polling, that we have spent at least 9,000 hours devoted to this task. So let's look at the draft that you have in front of you. And I'm just going to give you 5 key highlights that governed our work. These were the big takeaways. Number 1, the public asked us to look at developmentally appropriateness at all grade levels while maintaining the rigor of the standards. Secondly, teachers overwhelmingly did not want methodology to be included in the standard unless it was absolutely needed. So we took out specific instructional methods because we firmly believe that is a local decision. Third, there were some standards which were vague or ambiguous. So we defined limits into those standards. Fourth, the study of money was definitely something that needed to be included in the early grades, and I will let the chairperson speak to that individually. And lastly, high school math had standards which were shared. We had to do quite a bit of work to make sure that we attended to the division of that particular content. So at this time, I'm going to ask each of the chairpersons to give you a brief overview, starting with Ann Smith.
Thank you, Regina. First, I would like to publicly thank the members of our K2 committee for the many, many hours after school and in addition to their daily work with our students that they spent working on this process. The majority of our K2 members were classroom teachers or had just been in the classroom within the last year or two. Prior to our first meeting, they were assigned the task of reviewing the public comment, of looking at each standard, reviewing each standard, and making a recommendation to revise, rewrite, or clarify each standard or keep that standard as written. At our first meeting, we discussed each K2 English Language Arts and Math standard, had a very robust discussion about standards and what those standards mean to children, and then we came to consensus as to how we wanted to handle either the revision or the clarification or keeping that standard as written. As Regina said, the focus of our work in K2 included 3 primary areas that we really wanted to address. The first of these 3 areas is the developmentally appropriateness of each standard. I was lucky to have Ms. Michelle Jobert, who is the Louisiana Early Childhood Association president, working on our committee. We had Dr. Mary Bro, who is an early elementary specialist from Nicholls State University. And we had Enid Mason, who is the special ed director in Zachary Parish. These three individuals were valuable resources to our K-2 committee to keep us focused on the developmentally appropriateness of each standard while maintaining those high expectations. One example of our change as we looked at these standards was in kindergarten reading literature. The original standard stated that with prompting and support, students would name the author and illustrator of a story and define the role of each in telling a story. The word name the author and illustrator may indicate to a teacher that a student was to memorize names of authors and illustrators. With that thinking and that discussion, we removed that part of the standard so that the standard now reads, with prompting and support, define the role of the author and illustrator of a story in telling the story. The second area that we looked at was to make sure that there was a smooth transition of students from one grade to the next. Not only K2, but 2, 3, 4, and 5. An example of this was an addition of money in kindergarten and first grade. There is a kindergarten standard that exists in second grade, but no mention of money until second grade. We went back and we added the recognition of pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters by names and values in kindergarten, and then determining the value of coins or a collection of coins up to 50 cents in first grade to support that existing second grade standard so that those students would have foundational skills necessary prior to that second grade standard. And the other area that we really focused on was ensuring that standards allowed teachers more freedom in how to teach a standard. Standards are basically what students need to know and be able to do. How that is delivered in a classroom should be left up to that teacher. An example of this area is that we did remove examples that were given after standards that might limit teachers in making decisions. We wanted to empower teachers to make those curriculum decisions within their classrooms that best met the needs of their students. Those students who needed a little extra time or perhaps could move on, we wanted to empower those teachers to be able to make those decisions as they planned and prepared and presented in instruction.
Hello. I'm going to talk a little bit about the work for the committee, the ELA committee, grades 3 through 12. But first, I also want to thank my committee. We were able to come together from all over the state and do some really good work on these standards. We took a deep dive in each standard. We read them backwards, forwards. We talked about them. We read emails. We reflected on them. And we knew that we were charged with the task of just building the best set of standards for the kids of Louisiana. And that's what I think that we did. Many of our members are here tonight, and I hope that they will express to you the hard work that they put into this because they're very, very, very passionate and proud of the work that we did. With that, kind of like what Ann said, the ELA subcommittee had 3 really strong overarching themes that we really took a deep look at. The first one was based on the idea of a lot of examples that were in the standards. We too did not want to appear as though these standards were giving curriculum directives, so we made sure that anything that could be misinterpreted as curriculum we removed. We feel as though the teachers deserve the autonomy of the classroom to make those decisions. We wanted to give them the freedom to choose. If you have the handouts in front of you, did you guys get the handouts with the overarching themes? Just as an example, for the high school reading standard, it just says, analyze multiple interpretations of a story, drama, or poem. Example, recorded or e.g. recorded or live production of a play or recorded novel or poetry, evaluating how each version interprets the source text. And originally it had included at least one play by Shakespeare and one play by an American dramatist. We took that part out. We again wanted to leave that freedom to the teacher to decide what is the vehicle best serving to get the students to understand the standard. We wanted to make sure that our standards read as standards, not as curriculum directives. The next theme that we really concentrated on was to make sure that the changes that we had kept the high expectations for the students, and in some cases we had to go in and really tighten up the language a little bit to make sure that nobody would have to go backwards from where we were. And there's an example there. Gather relevant information from multiple authoritative sources using advanced searches effectively. Assess the strengths and limitations of each source in terms of the task, purpose, and audience. Integrate information into the text selectively to maintain the flow of ideas, avoiding plagiarism and over-reliance of any one source, and following a standard format for citation. And finally, the last thing that we really had to look hard at was the idea of to make sure our standards were cohesive across grade levels. We wanted to make sure that there weren't any redundancies or gaps in instruction, and the bulk of this work came at our December meeting where we were together K-12, and to me that's kind of where the magic happened. We were able to look at these standards through a full vertical alignment. So if the second grade group thought about changing a word, in Ann's group, we knew that that would have a ripple effect in second or third, fourth, and fifth grade, and possibly what would be the foundational skills that had to be changed in first grade. So there were a lot of ideas that we had to sit down and really take a deep look at that vertical alignment to make sure, again, that there were no redundancies or gaps in instruction. The work was positive. I think the outcome was great, and I hope that some of these folks will be able to speak to you this evening. Thank you.
Good evening. I would also like to thank the 3 through 12 Math Committee for their hours and hours of work, the many days that we spent together. And I would just like to thank you for this opportunity. This experience has been so valuable. It has made me a much better curriculum specialist as I serve our math teachers in our district. I've taught standards for years. Never have I understood them like I do now. And I just thank you for that experience. It has made me a much better educator. As the others have stated, our work kind of landed in certain focus areas, and as your handout states, one of the things that we worked hard to do was to make sure that Louisiana's new standards ensured that smooth transition from one grade to the next, and started out telling you about how we added, or they added, standards to ensure the conceptual development or the development of money standards. And so our committee went further to add a standard in third grade to continue that work, to solve word problems involving those same coins and even take that a little further. That's just one example of the work that we did in making sure that that smooth transition existed throughout our standards. All revisions discussed were checked and rechecked to ensure that they had a smooth progression, not only from grade level to grade level, but within the grade level. As Ann said, one slight change could have a ripple effect, and in math that was very important, that we made sure that a revision did not create an avalanche or create a gap for our students in future grades. Another focus of our work was to take a look at the developmentally appropriateness of the content for all grade levels, while still maintaining the high expectations. That was a huge focus of our work. In one example of something that we did change based on public feedback and feedback from teachers, I will say that the math committee did meet many times, and every time they met, we left with the assignment to reach out to classroom teachers in your district, find out what they feel, find out what they think. And in doing so, we were able to ensure that not only just the developmentally appropriate content, but just to get their feedback on some of the work that we've done. One change that we did make was a third grade standard in the area, or in the context of area. The third graders were asked to divide a figure into different sections in order to find the area, and a lot of public comment and comments from teachers said, we just really don't feel that is good for third grade. So as you see in your handout, that standard was moved as it is written to grade 4, so that in grade 4 they would do the conceptual development, and then they would shift to the formula that they would use to find the area of a figure. Another piece of our work, and we spent a lot of time on this, was that the high school standards applied the same skill to different types of equations, and our high school committee members spent many hours discussing the proper placement of each of these equation types. They did not want this left up to a curriculum to decide for a teacher, and even more so did not want it left up to a teacher's interpretation of the standard. So they worked very hard to place those equation types in the proper place, and I think that speaks strongly to taking a look at what our freshmen, sophomore, juniors can do developmentally at that age. Another focus of our work was making sure that Louisiana standards were not open to multiple interpretations. One example is given in that 8th graders are asked to explain a proof of the Pythagorean theorem and its converse. And as one of our high school committee members pointed out, there are 300 ways to prove the Pythagorean theorem and its converse. And so as not to leave teachers hanging, the standard was changed to explain a proof of the Pythagorean theorem and its converse using the area of squares. So we looked at a lot of standards. We looked at all standards in this light, making sure that they were not open to multiple interpretations, so that teachers didn't have to guess what it meant. They needed to know clearly what that expectation was. And then the last big part of our focus was making sure that Louisiana's new standards allowed teachers to choose the most appropriate method for teaching specific content. And you have an example in your handout of a 4th grade standard that simply said apply and extend previous understandings, which may speak to the way they learned it in 4th grade, but by rewriting it to say, and that was in multiplication to multiply a fraction by a whole number. This standard was rewritten to just say multiply a fraction by a whole number, allowing that teacher the autonomy to choose the method that they would use to teach that. These examples speak to the focus of the 3 through 12 Math Committee, and I can assure you that every standard was looked at, not once, twice, but it was looked at many times. And I echo her comment that some of the most valuable work came when we brought Ann's K through 2 math teachers in, and we divided them into domains, and they looked for that progression, not only of skill, but of language, consistency throughout the domain. And we offered feedback to both committee members, and suggestions were made. We went back into our committees and once again reviewed that and continued our work in that light. Thank you.
With that being said, you have a draft in front of you that our committee has approved for your consideration. So we definitely would like you to review those documents. With that being said, many of the discussions that we had regarding standards were not absent without other sidebar conversations. And some of those sidebar conversations regarding implementation, and while that was not our charge, we could not continue our work without at least having conversations about that. So with that being said, we look forward to working with the department to ensure that we have all of the pieces and parts that we need for a successful implementation, because we realize that not all districts have the same type of resources to tackle this transition if you so adopt these standards with the resources that they have in place. So we have asked the department for companion documents, exemplars, crosswalks, to assist districts with professional development to ensure that we meet all different levels of learners. We will tell you that technology readiness came up over and over in our meetings, and many of the committee members, the teachers, said it should not be embedded in the standards per se and not on the back of one specific discipline. This should be left up to districts, and in collaboration with the Department of Education, we hope that they will give us some technology standards or technology checklists that districts can then use to help implement as we move to online testing. We also had many discussions about fourth-year math standards, because that was a public comment that came up over and over. And while we were reviewing all of the existing standards, our work was left undone for fourth-year math standards. So the courses such as financial math, pre-calculus, calculus, those courses will need to be developed, and we have reached out to the department and feel confident that they're going to put together a team to develop those standards as well. So with all of that being said, you have the draft document in front of you, and I will close by saying it was a pleasure to serve on this committee, and one of our members left us with a lasting statement. She said, "I wish that every Louisiana classroom teacher could have been part of this process, because the learning was so rich, and you brought forth the best group of professional educators possible throughout the state of Louisiana." Thank you.
Ladies, I almost hate to ask this because it's so late, but are you planning on staying for the duration of the testimony tonight in case board members have questions later on?
Yes, we're going to be here.
Okay. Thank you. Very helpful. We're going to move into the public comment piece of this meeting. And so I'll call people down 4 at a time. Everybody gets 3 minutes. We have the timer here. And then while people are coming down, I'm going to read some names into the record, because we have a stack of cards for individuals who did not want to testify, but did wish to speak as to their opinion on this issue. So let's go. We'll start with Scott Richard, Deborah Moe, Brian Lejeune, and Dr. Elizabeth Myers. While those 4 individuals come down to share their public comments, I'd like to read names into the record. These individuals identified that they did not wish to speak. Jasmine Porter supports the recommendation. Jasmine Hall Archangel supports the recommendation. Nikki Dangerfield supports the recommendation. Tasha Dennis supports the recommendation. Mr. Richard?
Thank you, Chairman Bofi. Scott Richard, representing the Louisiana School Boards Association and a member of the Standards Review Committee. First, want to thank Ms. Sanford and the team of teachers and curriculum practitioners from across the state that worked on this project, and thank their various superintendents and school boards for basically letting them be put on loan throughout this process. Ms. Sanford definitely did a commendable job, along with the other folks who came to the table tonight, and all the teachers that are here in this room that have gone through this grueling day of BESE governmental action. The recommendations that are before you tonight, the approval of the standards or the adoption of the standards, are important But just as important, or even more so important to every local school system across the state and the citizens and parents and children across the state, are the set of recommendations that are included in the minutes that are in your packets, hopefully. We certainly respect the interpretation of Superintendent White regarding the legal steps that need to occur relative to what happens next, but there is a very specific process in the Common Core Compromise bill, or set of bills that passed, and the Administrative Procedures Act is very specific as what needs to happen. The timelines, the rule itself facilitates finality of the process prior to implementation. And there's a number of measures that need to be included in that process, and the timelines are very specific. Things such as a fiscal impact statement to accompany the rule itself, a general economic impact statement, an impact statement on child or individuals or families in poverty needs to accompany the whole process. And in a time of scarce financial resources, it's important that we follow that process to make sure every school system across the state has even implementation, and we don't miss the boat this time in regards to putting together a set of standards that we can all be proud of, and implementing and completing the process that was put forth by the committees that presented to you tonight. So we would ask that we continue that dialogue as far as clarity as to what happens next, and very likely there'll be instruments filed in the legislative session that we'll need to work on together to make sure the state is in a posture to finally have Louisiana standards that reflect Louisiana values. And with that, we appreciate, again, all the teachers that are still here tonight. Thank you for your service. Thank you, Ms. Sanford. And happy to still be here at 7:30. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Richard. Mr. Lejeune.
Brian Lejeune, Superintendent of Schools in Jeff Davis Parish, Vice President of the Louisiana Louisiana School Superintendents Association, President of the Region 4 and 5 Superintendents Association. I give you all that information because we've been having these discussions with a lot of superintendents about where we go and what the superintendents and school systems would like to see happen. And we would like to echo Mr. Richard's thoughts in that the ladies that worked on the committee, great job, ladies, and I was lucky enough to have a couple of people on those review committees, and they were extremely excited about the process. But the process of the standards, and the standards, as great as they may be and how hard our teachers work, cannot be taken and put in a place where the implementation hurts the standards process, and that's our concern. We are in the process in Jeff Davis Parish, like most districts are, of unwrapping, unpacking, looking at all of those standards to see what that means, and working with our teacher leaders to provide guidance at our schools to see how we do all of this. That's going to take some time. If the process is that this doesn't get implemented till the beginning or the end of the summer, then we start the next school year with that process not complete.
Mr. Lejeune, I'm going to ask you to focus on the item that we're talking about in terms of the standards adoption itself.
I was addressing the implementation standards that went with that document, and that's where I was, and I appreciate the opportunity to give my viewpoint as a superintendent and the rest of the superintendents. So again, the standards are fantastic, but implementation is just as important.
Thank you, Mr. Lejeune. Dr. Myers?
Elizabeth Myers. I'm a retired educator and currently an education researcher. I'm a little bit confused because is the crosswalk the document on the LDOE website that is the new standards? There's a crosswalk.
The standards are what the...
Well, there's a, not to make this into a back and forth, but there's a bulletin. The bulletin is the new standards.
I'm sorry?
Bulletin.
The bulletin is the new standards, the regulations.
Okay, so the crosswalk is not the new standards then?
The crosswalk is a document that's a tool That's just a tool for people to review. This is the new standards.
Okay. Well, the reason I asked that is because I forwarded this to some national experts and had them look at the crosswalk to see the new standards versus the standards that we previously had. And basically, he did, this one particular expert did what's called a color code, did a color code of the crosswalk, looking at what we had and what we now have. The pink represents essentially no change. The yellowish color represents a few word change, and the blue represents major changes. And in this particular level, you can see that there's only one blue. So I'm not sure that maybe I'm looking at the crosswalk as not being the new standards. I'll go back and look at that again. However, I come to the table a little bit differently than everybody else. I'm a retired educator. However, I taught college-bound kids. What brings me to the table, number one, I take a little bit of exception to being said that my objection to the Common Core was politically motivated. It was motivated by the fact that I want to see this state be the best that it can be, and I have in my career tried to do that. I have some concerns if this, in fact, is the new standards. We talk about making these content lists. That's where I have concerns with the ELA. When you take the standards, and the standards to me in the high school aren't much different than what we had before with some tweaks here and there. And if you look at the Fordham study, they said that we had as good of standards. They were too close to call, with the exception that they praised Louisiana for including within our standards specific requirements to include American literature, which other states don't normally do. And they praised us for that. What concerns me about these standards being very vague is that we are lacking, number one, that they're still in the standards of what I was looking at. Can I please have a little bit?
Please wrap up.
May I have a few more moments, please? I came a long way. Thank you. What I'm asking you to look at in these standards is that they're vague. They're vague in terms of classical education. Now, if you want rote, you're going to get it with this. But if you want that classical, rich education, look at the ACT study. The ACT study said that performance on the complex test is the clearest differentiator between those that will be ready for college and those that will not. And it's the complexity of the text that if you don't put some content in the ELA, we're having teachers in our district picking things that are not quality. We should have at least a recommended list of good quality literature. And then also about
Dr. Myers, thank you for your time tonight. Our next speaker is Jawan Brown Alexander, Sarah Wood, Alicia Blanchard, and Brenda Obrock. While those speakers are coming down, I'm going to give you the names of speakers who did not wish to speak. Mickey Landry supports the recommendation. Suzette Riddle supports the recommendation. Susanna Schoen supports the recommendation. John Martin supports the recommendation. Ms. Woods?
I'm here today to urge you all to reject this recommendation from the Standards Review Committee because it lacks substantial changes and is therefore just a rebrand of Common Core, which rebrand was not the intent and legislative purpose in passing the Common Core and Compromise bills, though maybe the intent and design of the superintendent and the pro-Common Core BESE members who largely majorly chose pro-Common Core educators for the review. This predetermined rebrand can be supported by experiences here and in other states. Only yesterday, an article was written by Nicholas Tampio, an associate professor from Fordham, who reviewed New York's recent plan to revise and implement New York standards to replace Common Core, and his observation about New York Standards Review is eerily similar to, almost exact, to what we experienced in Louisiana with our predetermined rebrand. This New York observation and our Louisiana experience is common to just about every state that supposedly set out to develop its own state standards because rising parents denounced Common Core as the deficient garbage that it is. Professor Tampio considers this rigged process in New York and states it becomes clear that its Department of Education will waste a year of our time creating standards that are virtually identical to the Common Core. Sounds very familiar to me as to what we're seeing here. He goes on to state that the public was asked to submit comment on each specific standard, effectively like a survey, and that of over the 64,000 people that visited the site, only around 15,000 respondents provided feedback, meaning 3 out of the 4 visitors to this public portal in some way rejected the survey format. He felt, and I quote, that it was a push-pull meant to build support rather than solicit meaningful feedback. Sounds very familiar to me. So why are the complaints across state lines so common, not only as to Common Core deficiencies, but now common as to its rebirth in a majority of states with minor variations newly named with each state's own ostensible brand? Like Professor Tampio's New York concerns, I myself complained in August at the first standards review meeting about the unfairness of having those that like the standards in total check an I like box to record their public favor, while not offering an equally simple option to those who did not like the Common Core standards in total as well. Not only were we denied this equal opportunity and equal treatment, but we were unfairly burdened with the requirement of having to make a specific comment about each and every standard we disliked or wanted deleted. And as if that weren't bad enough, it had a time limit, which would kick you and you would lose your comment out at any given time. We complained about this. Why was it designed to be discriminatorily burdensome to one group similarly situated with another group? Furthermore, and I'm almost finished, why were parents whose children are suffering under this collective education scheme not directed to provide feedback through this public portal? As to the symptoms, the real symptoms resulting from this confused, dumbed-down, teach-to-the-test education, so that in fair and a reasonable world, a more accurate assessment and review could have taken place instead of this rigged process. The concerns are too many to list in a 3-minute session here, but the fact remains that the standards review process overall did nothing at all to resolve the problem except to launder the toxic Common Core brand to the extent that we now have a recommendation for a rebrand of Common Core under a new name for the same toxic garbage. Shame on you all once again.
Ms. Obrock?
Push the button first, don't I?
Ms. Obrock, just pull it closer to you. The green light's on, and then pull it close.
Okay, I want to make sure that everything I say is a public record. I drove 5 hours to speak. I am from Caddo Parish, and I also have a poem that was written by 2 students from Gulf High School in Newport Richey, Florida. I want to make sure each one of you BESE board members get a copy of this, but I don't want you reading it until after you hear what I have to say.
We'll ask the staff to hold on until you finish.
Pardon?
The staff will hold it until you finish reading.
Okay, but these students, it's so sad what Sarah just said. I'm going to reiterate, but you know what we have is not working. The students, and you'll read it from this poem, they know it's not working. Common Core displeases students, too much testing. After 13 years, I still don't know how to do my taxes or how insurance works. It's all wrong, but it doesn't matter because he says they don't care anyway. You're not listening anyway. I want you to listen. What I'm about to tell you will bring your awareness to why we are in so much chaos concerning many aspects of education. I've owned and helped run a successful repair company for over 30 years. You cannot stay in business long telling customers that their washer is fixed when it doesn't drain, rinse, or agitate. Our education reform is broken. We continue using temporary fixes that just put a patch on our symptoms instead of a bona fide solution. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. You can't ignore the chaos. And it is pronounced when we continue doing what we've done for too long, expecting different results. Here's what I'm referring to: ignoring the rule of law.
the Administrative Procedure Act, which was ignored in 2009 when public input was denied, which opened the door for Common Core to enter our schools. Number 2, taking votes on committees before hearing public input is in violation of open meeting laws. This happened at the October 12 BOSIR meeting that was held that I attended. Number 3, so is using contrived methods to ignore public input. With all of the public outcry concerning the boondoggle of Common Core, I was glad to hear that the standards review process of the Louisiana BESE portal would finally listen to our grievances. I soon learned that both were as much a charade as Common Core. Here's how. The standards review meeting in Bossier City, October 12th, had a good attendance of committee members, elected officials, parents of students, but the committee disregarded the open meeting laws by voting before hearing from the public. I have witnesses. It was recorded. I arrived early but had to wait 6 hours before I was allowed to speak to this committee. Parents had to leave to pick up their children from school and without the opportunity to speak publicly. The parents whose children are most affected by bad school reform, which is what this is, were not heard on this day. The portal with Louisiana BESE was supposed to gather public input.
Are you wrapping up your comments?
I am.
Thank you.
The portal was supposed to gather public input, but this attempt was skewed and the website worked intermittently. In the middle of posting statements, they would suddenly disappear, and at times the website was down completely. This happened to a lot of people. The negative public comments were not mentioned in minutes of some of these meetings. If you were a legislator reading these minutes, you would likely think that everyone is perfectly happy with the review process. Because so many other attempts had failed to communicate the many deficiencies of Common Core, I continue to email this committee of 100. Some review process members were rude and tried to intimidate me as I continued to give them my input on these education issues. It was obvious they were not open to my input. This is my last statement.
Good.
This appointed panel was continuing in the pattern of rejecting the rule of law and ignoring and discounting public input, the same negligent pattern that thrust Common Core through in 2010. In the repair business, if you continue applying broken parts or the wrong parts to a machine, the outcome will not be productive or profitable.
Thank you, Ms. O'Brien.
This is where we are.
Hi, my name is Alicia Blanchard. I would just like to start by introducing myself. I taught first grade for over 9 years. I also taught pre-K for almost a full year. I obtained my master's degree in educational administration and then became master teacher at a school in Terrebonne Parish for over 2.5 years, where I then became Terrebonne Parish's literacy curriculum specialist for grades K through 5 for almost 4 years. I can say that I am lucky enough to be back at the school where I first taught in Terrebonne Parish as the assistant principal. Curriculum is my love. I love curriculum. With that, I'm the mother of 3 boys. All 3 of my children are in public school. I have an 8th grader, I have a 6th grader, and I have a 1st grader. I have a master's in educational leadership. My BA is in elementary education, grades 1 through 8, and I am a national board certified teacher and early childhood generalist, and I have been certified for over 14 years as a national board teacher. Before leaving the classroom and as being the literacy curriculum specialist, I have been able to serve on numerous committees in our school district. And years ago, when we only had the little blue binder that had the standards, our district wrote our own objectives. And it was something that we did, and I was lucky enough to be part of that committee before GLEs were even out. When GLEs came out, yes, I know.
You're dating yourself.
I'm sorry. When GLEs came out, thankfully, we were on the right road in Terrebonne Parish. I say all of this because I was just one of the K-2 members on this subcommittee. And I can tell you that I was just one with the knowledge I had. The other committee members were phenomenal, and they had just as much knowledge. I think one of the things that I take pride in as an educator is I worry about children first, and I'm a very ethical person, and in everything that we do, I always make sure that the children's best interest is at the top of everything that we do as an educator. Because I'm a mom too, and when I lay my head on the pillow at night, I have to say, you know, I've done everything I could. You know, when I was in the district level, I'd always wonder, how do these things happen on the state level? What goes on behind the closed doors? I can tell you that everyone needs to be able to sit and watch this, because it was not a closed door, secretive thing where we all had our own agendas. I put some words down to describe my experience on the committee. Positive, eye-opening, intellectual, serious, investigative, time-consuming, difficult, passionate, and flexible. Because I will tell you, we did not all agree. We had very robust conversation. I would say it was very passionate conversations. But we had to be flexible. We took our job serious, and I appreciate the opportunity to serve on this committee, and I want you to know that we took it very seriously. Not one single standard was discussed for a very short amount of time. It was discussed at length, and I'm very proud of the product that we put up.
Thank you, Ms. Blanchard. Ms. Brown-Alexander?
I just want to start by saying my first meeting in Alexandria with the subcommittee, because I was both a subcommittee member and a whole group member, the steering committee member, was 11 hours. So to say that it was watered down.
We can relate.
11 hours. So to say that it was watered down, I don't really understand that comment. Again, I'm Joanne Brown-Alexander, Standards Review Committee member and ELA Subcommittee member. Currently, I am the assistant principal, assistant head of school for school performance at Lafayette Academy Charter School in New Orleans. The BESE board, we had the pleasure of hosting you all last week at our school in New Orleans. Before your vote, I would just like to impress upon you the importance of passing the standards that our committee passed on February 2nd. These standards have gone through a thorough, rigorous, transparent process that was arduous and painstaking, but necessary. Stakeholders from every aspect of education, including community partners and our partners from higher ed, were a part of this process. It involved considering our former standards, looking at GLEs, researching national norms, and putting public comment at the center. Our committee and subcommittee sacrificed a lot, and committee members heard thank yous from Louisianians who appreciated our efforts. We were resolute in accomplishing our goals, which were to provide a set of ELA and math standards that teachers can embrace and will prepare our students for college and beyond. It is my sincere belief that passing these standards today is what is best for the children of Louisiana, and therefore is what is best for Louisiana's future. In closing, I would like to thank this body for going back to the proverbial drawing board so that we could get it right for our kids. I would also like to commend the LDOE staff for making sure that our meeting rooms and accommodations were prepared for us. Thank you again for hearing my comment.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, can I ask a question before she leaves?
Yes, ma'am.
You said, you mentioned that you had lots of public comment, and we've heard some situations about the portal. How did you get your public comment? Who is it from? Can you just kind of describe that just briefly for me?
So the portal information was downloaded into an Excel document where we were able to scan it all.
Okay.
That was our homework. We studied this. We digested it. I mean, it was our life for the time period that we actually looked at these standards. It was a rigorous and transparent process. All of our meetings were open. Some of the comments that I heard prior to mine, that was not my experience at all. And I came to this process not being on either side. So I'm just not sure where those comments are coming from. Every one of our committee, subcommittee, and whole group committee meetings were open to the public. And we invited the public. And again, there were thank yous from the public when they did come to our meetings.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. We're going to go with our next group. We have Stephanie DeSalle, Catherine Goplet, Joshua Underwood, and Jada Singleton. While they're coming down, I'll share the names of others who did not wish to speak. Janet Bean supports the recommendation. Kara McCall strongly supports the recommendation. Murray Pitts supports the recommendation. Stacy Martin supports the recommendation. Russell Miller supports the recommendation. Ms. DeSalle?
No, we can't.
Okay. Thank
Yeah,
you
we
very
can.
much, Madam Chair and members. It's a late night. I'll try to be brief. I represent the Council for a Better Louisiana. We are a nearly 60-year-old organization, nonprofit, nonpartisan, of citizens and leaders from across the state. We've been heavily involved in this issue and other foundational issues which will help our students in Louisiana. Our position has been and still is that we would like to see the continued full integration of college and career-ready standards for our students here in our state, and to make sure that they are comparable to those in other states, and to provide consistency and stability to our teachers and our students. On the recent standards review process, we attended and monitored meetings. We provided input online. And by the way, I and a lot of people I know went online. We participated in the process. It was not difficult. It was very straightforward. It was very easy to give your comments and to provide the input. We encouraged the public. We encouraged our members and other organizations to do so as well. We reviewed many of the proposed revisions ourselves. We also have interviewed educators. In addition to that, we enlisted some outside external expert help to review the revisions and give us feedback, just to ourselves, because we just wanted to know what people had, educators, experts from outside Louisiana, had to say. I'm happy to say that their detailed analysis back to us has been very positive and has confirmed what the educators' work has been on this committee. The upshot is we believe these standards are and remain strong for Louisiana students. They will help our students better prepare for college and career, and we urge you to adopt them this evening. We do not see any need to delay the adoption of these standards at all. I don't think our students deserve any kind of delay. Now, having said that, I think the department and others are collaborating to put together very strong tools and information and materials for teachers that will help make up for a lot of continuity as we move to these revisions. I just want to end by saying that our students in this state deserve the same high expectations based on substance that the students in 41 other states have already moved on to and are doing every day. So we appreciate your support for this as a foundational policy. I'm finishing up, Ms. Bophy. And we believe that these standards will give the greatest benefit to the largest number of students in our state. And that's what we should be doing, and we thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Goppelt?
To speak. Comments by people who don't agree with all the standards are not meant to be an attack personally. I hope people won't take them that way, because I feel like there's a lot of animosity in the room. We have the same goals. We want children to succeed. Okay? The April 18th meeting of the review process began, and this was reported in the newspaper. The committee charged with reworking the state's academic benchmarks indicated Thursday, this is what the committee said, that it will likely tweak, not throw out, the Common Core standards. Some comments from the public. There's no access to the questions and results related to each standards tested on the park-like exam. Made it difficult for them to actually look at the standards and see if they were good, if they were right. The process was dictated by BESE and was not subject to change. I do want to commend Regina for her work. She was diligent. The teachers, I know they did a good job. They spent all those 9,000 hours, but the result is still Common Core. The process was not fair to everyone, and that's why I'm here today and some other people, because you got to look at all perspectives. Everybody has a view. It's not all the same. The governor's transition report by his team, and Miss Ann was on that, Ann Smith. They basically said in 2010 we moved to national standards called Common Core. So these aren't standards from Louisiana, they're from Washington, D.C. The act that we're discussing, we're talking about, it really sounds to me like, you have no other recourse but to adopt these standards that are being put before you. But I want to tell you what the legislators said about the process as they watched it. In a press release, they said this: the spirit of the compromise has not been kept by BESE or the Department of Education. While negotiating the agreement, Superintendent John White made the point that the review committee should have access to anything they need to make their decision. The intent was to identify the areas of concern and make appropriate adjustments to improve the standards and remove the controversy while making them Louisiana's own. I looked at the math a little bit, but I looked very carefully at the ELA. Every single standard, I read it and looked at the crosswalk. Of the 858 Common Core standards, K through 12 in ELA, no standards were moved, no standards were added. Of the 81 so-called changes, 30 were exactly the same, a copy and paste. In most of the remaining 51, the order of the words might have been changed, or one word was added, but the content remained the same. The concerns of developmental inappropriateness in the elementary grade has not been addressed. 143 changes in math. There were some good changes there, I think, in the upper grades. The committee only looked at the Common Core, though, and the strategies remain. We're still drawing.
Are you wrapping up?
Pictures. No, I'm not wrapping up. I've been here all day, and I'm going to finish. Thank you.
Ms. Goppel, we have a lot of people who have also been here all day.
Dr.
And I'm glad you were, because that's your job.
Hold on. This is very, very important, and we've all been here. It's 10 after 8. I don't think it's fair.
Ms. Edmondson, I've allowed an extra minute for the other individuals, and I'll allow an extra minute for Ms. Goppel. But I'm trying to treat everyone the same here.
Well, then let me have my extra minute, please. Why is there no cursive writing K through 12? It's a very concern, because we are denying our children to have a signature when they graduate from high school. They can balance their equations, but they can't balance their checkbooks. One member of the ELA committee wanted to add one standard, and her committee said, no, we can't do that because it can't be tested. Are our children learning to take tests but not learning skills necessary to thrive in the real world? Tests are important, but should tests be the only determining factor to define who we are? The informational text in K through 12 is inappropriate. This was added because of NAEP, yet our students do not test in NAEP till 4th grade. The percentage of informational text has overshadowed the truth, beauty, and virtue found in literature. This needs to be brought back into balance. The legislature and governor cannot make amendments to the standards once they're adopted. So if you accept them and the legislature and the governor decide they don't like them, you're going to go back to the drawing board. Start all over again.
Ms. Goffert, your extra time is up. Mr. Underwood?
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, it's been a long day, so I may be a little slow, sorry. My name is Josh Underwood. I'm a lifelong resident of Calcasieu Parish. I've got 4 daughters at Iowa Middle School and Blue Settlement Elementary, kindergarten, 1st grade, 4th, and 6th. I run a youth track and field organization. We've got a year-round program, about 130 kids, ages 7 to 14, and my wife's also an educator. Teaches high school biology and chemistry. I want to tell you this because I want you to understand that when I say that I'm fully invested as a stakeholder in my community and in the state education system, I mean it. I mean, this is my life right now. Dad's number one. So, I thoroughly believe that it's it's first off my responsibility to make sure that my kids leave the school system educated. With that being said, I don't have the qualifications that I need to teach my kids. I have the knowledge, but I'm not an educator. So I put that trust in the educators in my community. My kids are all in public school, and I'm very proud of it. I love our schools. I love our teachers. I think what's going on right now is we have a lot of parents who aren't professionals, who don't know education, that are trying to step in. And I totally respect that. As a parent, I believe we should all have say. But we need to pick those professionals that we trust to do the job and let them do their job. You have a committee who took our public comments. I mean, I took part in the online survey like many other parents did. I didn't see any of I never lost any of my comments, and I made many of them. I spent quite a bit of time on that. And back to speak on the, being complicated, it was not a complicated process. It was a time-consuming process, as it should be. I mean, we're talking about our kids' education. It shouldn't be something simple. But I didn't see any problems with the portal. It worked fine. I got my comments in, and I love the fact that not only was I able to make comments, but it was the first time I saw the standards in that format, so I was really able to read through and see, and understand what I was looking at. So I'm confident that process worked. As far as the new standards, I don't have a real opinion one way or the other. What I do have an opinion on is what's going on in our classrooms right now. Since Common Core was implemented, which I'm now, I'm somewhat of a believer now. I think it's making some good changes. But we need stability in those classrooms before we can see the progress that change is going to bring. And year after year, we've seen change after change. So let's get these new standards in place, and let's leave them there for a little bit. Let's you had the senator up here earlier saying that he wants to see results. When he kind of hijacked your meeting, I want to see results too, and I'm sure the teachers want to see results. You guys want to see results. We can't see those results until these kids have some time to adjust, and when we quit making changes. So I'm going to wrap up. I won't take my full extra minute. But in closing, I just want to say I commend you guys on what you're doing. I know the last few years have been crazy for you guys. It's been tough on parents, it's been tough on teachers, it's been tough on students. But we're seeing progress, and I think we can continue to see progress, but we need to take some of the chaos out of the classroom. We need to quit making so many changes and let some of this stand and see if it works. And thank you guys.
Thank you. Next, we have Tasha Dennis, I'm sorry. Tasha Dennis, Brenda DeFelice, Nikki Dangerfield, Carrie Griffin Monica, and is Tasha here? Nope. We'll go with Eric Brown then. Ms. DeFelice, go ahead and get started.
Okay. My name is Brenda DeFelice, and I've been a classroom teacher for 27 years here in Louisiana. For the last 24, I've taught gifted mathematics, geometry, algebra 2, advanced math, and AP calculus. And I was also asked to be a member of the math subcommittee appointed by BESE to review the standards. I went into this with my eyes wide open, hoping for the best, a little leery on what we were asking to do, of course, in a short time frame. And went to that first meeting in August. We got our directive. I was assigned to a small group. I think there were 3 of us to work on the geometry standards and poured my heart and soul into it, just like every other member of the committee did. At that first August meeting, when the steering committee was meeting, someone made a motion asking if we could put together a committee or add people to the table, bring in professors as in an advisory role. And it was shot down by the steering committee, saying that that was not at all their task to change the directive from you to the standards review process. We met in October, very rushed. I think math went 3rd that week, and ELA and K2 had wrapped up, and and I heard that it was magical how they reached an agreement. In math, it was very, very, very slow, and we knew we needed more time. I even sent a letter to the committee members asking for that time, worried about that. One of the days they added for us was in December. Before our scheduled meeting on December 3rd, some high school group, we were asked to come in, and this was after the other two ladies working on geometry had met without me. I was out of state, and made some significant changes, but they were changes in the standards that I did support, and they knew I would support them. And we were asked to come a day early, and this meeting was not videotaped. It was right here in the Claiborne building, and as soon as I walked in and went in that room, I knew the fix was in, because added to the table that day for the discussions was Scott Baldridge, author of Eureka Math, James Madden, one of the original Common Core math authors, and both from LSU. Tia Alfonso, she works with Eureka Math in some manner. There was also, it was one of the ladies who works for the Department of Education, and is also an associate of Park, but I forget which one was there. But they were brought in because we were trying to make a significant change in geometry. And that's the day I resigned. Because we were put together to move forward, and I kept reading in campaign advertisements and literature how Louisiana was going to end up with its very own standards developed by educators. And that's not at all what we did. We wanted to look at other states, and we did on our own. And several of us proposed on a conference call and in those committee meetings, can we just set aside the Common Core, and can we start with this set of standards over here and make changes in these standards? And we weren't allowed. We had to stick to just the Common Core. Well, I resigned that day because I felt the directive from the steering committee was clear. We were not to add anybody to the table. I feel that there are still missing concepts. ACT released tests last April and December, and in those released tests, there are math questions not covered by what you're about to approve. I want to be part of this process. I want to do it right. If it takes every day for a year, I think that we have the people and the capability here to come up with Louisiana's very own standards. But what you're about to approve is a Common Core rebrand. Everyone can see it. 80% is still the same, and I did not want my name any way associated with that end result. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Good evening. Thanks for allowing me to.
Pull the mic closer.
Okay. Can you hear me?
I think so.
Okay. Good evening. Thanks for allowing me the opportunity to speak today.
Sir, you need to say your name. I'm sorry.
Okay. My name is Eric Brown.
Thank you.
They call me Coach Eric. I coach at a local high school in Baton Rouge. I am also a father and parent to my kids and the kids that I coach. That's why I took the opportunity to go through and review some of the standards myself through the online portal. While I only went through standards in my kids' grades, I would say that doing so was very easy to do at home on my computer, and I appreciate that I was given the chance to do that. I work with the teachers every day, and I know that they are committed to making sure our kids get the best. I trust a dozen of educators on the review panel. They were committed to making sure that these standards get our kids where they're needed to be, to prepare them for college and jobs. I trust the educators, and I trust this process because I was able to take part in it. That's why I support the adoption of these newly revised standards, and I hope you'll consider adopting those as well. I know as a member of the community that I was able to provide my input on my students' learning targets, and I trust the educators who reviewed the comments and standards. I knew they did it within the best interest of our kids in mind. I think what we have now is a great set of learning standards is a great set of learning standards that our state can be proud of. And thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you for being so succinct. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Carrie Griffin-Monica, and I'm the Executive Director of Stand for Children Louisiana, and most importantly, I am a parent. Chairwoman Boffey and BESE members, first of all, I want to say thank you so much for your time today and the time and thoughtful consideration that you all have been putting in for many years into the development of high rigorous standards for all students across our state, with the guiding belief that every single child can learn, meet, and exceed every high bar that we set for them. I also want to thank this board for supporting a review process led by Louisiana educators and for believing in their ability to develop those high standards, also led by the belief that every child can meet and exceed them. Stand for Children Louisiana parents, educators, and members have consistently been supportive of high rigorous standards for all students, and we believe our Louisiana educators have absolutely delivered exactly that before you today. I want to commend and thank the more than 100 educators who have put in more than 9,000 hours working through this process for their hard and great work. I think today it is clear that we have a solid set of high standards that we can all be proud of that are being recommended, and I ask you to vote in favor of those. I'm extremely eager for the day that we can move forward with these high standards and go through solid implementation of them so that our students and the teachers who have put so much time into this process for many years can have the consistency and stability that they deserve, and so our students can continue to meet and exceed every high bar we've set for them, just like they always have. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next round of speakers will include Leslie Truax, Bridget Nealon, Jody Benoit, and Lee Barrios. While they're coming up, I'd like to share that Karen Clark supports the recommendation, and so does Alexandra Diero. And that concludes our the people who do not want to speak but turned in cards. Ms. Truax?
Yes, before I get started, I'd like to point out that Ms. Brenda DeFelice, who resigned from the committee, can attest to those standards, those Common Core standards that are not aligned to the ACT. She recently took the ACT and scored a 36 in math, reading, and English. She bombed the science with a 33, but she can attest to that. So before I get started, I just wanted to point that out, that she does know that it's not aligned. My name is Leslie Truax. I'm a classroom teacher from Calcasieu Parish. I took a personal day today, which I really didn't have to. I'm here to speak on behalf of a committee member who resigned, Ms. Shauna Dufran. Shauna Dufran has been teaching for 11 years. She was not able to attend today's meeting. 8 years she's been teaching 4th grade mathematics. I'd like to read her statement for you. When I was appointed by BESE members to be on a committee of Louisiana educators to create standards for Louisiana, I was excited. I thought finally as a state we are admitting that there are problems with the current standards, and now we can finally move forward to creating something better. I believe that everyone was there to create the best standards for Louisiana students. I believe that we would have a true input in creating new standards, but what happened was the complete opposite. My first concern was we were only allowed to discuss the Common Core state standards. Each subgroup, 2 to 3 people, reviewed the grade level standards in which they were assigned. Then we presented the standards that we believed needed to be modified, and we moved those to the entire group. Most changes were challenged and ultimately shot down by people in different grades who had never even taught the grade level being discussed. Also, we knew immediately who was in support of not making any changes to the Common Core standards. There was not a lot of give and take. If you didn't like the standards, all you were doing was giving a recommendation and taking no change. If there were changes, they were extremely minor and of no real significance. At the very first meeting, the steering committee discussed adding other members to the team. This was heavily debated and decided that no members would be added. Then the discussion turned to bringing them on as advisors instead of members. This was again heavily debated and stated that it would be opening up Pandora's box. Once again, it was decided that no advisors would be added. So when 3 advisors who were pro-Common Core were brought onto the team, I knew that someone would stop and call foul. However, this never happened, and the whole atmosphere changed dramatically. Ideas and discussion were shut down almost immediately, and the majority of the members would not debate these advisors. These advisors hold a lot of clout in the state, so it would be not in the best interest of anyone who wants to move up to debate these advisors. The reason I resigned is I would not put my name on anything stating that these were Louisiana standards. I will not go back to the classroom and tell parents, teachers, or students that I created new standards. I'm not giving them false hope that real changes were made and that their classrooms have once again had harmony. It was stated that there were tweaks to the standards, and that is 100% true. Minor tweaks to Common Core standards. I would like to add, too, that all of you who were elected to BESE ran on a campaign that you were opposed to Common Core, that you listened to parents, that you led the charge to get rid of Common Core standards, and we would have our own Louisiana standards. As a constituent of District 7, we were lied to.
Ms. Barrios?
Lee Barrios, St. Tammany. Maybe this is a little bit lighter moment, but I wanted to share one of those grit your teeth moments that I experienced when I was watching the Congressional Education and Workforce Committee hearing the other day. It was about ESSA, and the subject of the interrogation was new Secretary John King. And the whole purpose of the hearing, which lasted a couple of hours, was the intent of this committee and their work on ESA to maintain local control and to understand, to have John King understand and to understand his position on local control. You all remember the moniker College and Career Ready Standards. It was used as a substitute for the name Common Core Standards. When someone didn't want to say Common Core, they would say College and Career Ready. We were told and sort of threatened by the federal government, supposedly, that we had to have College and Career Ready Standards. I believe it was Congressman Bishop who asked Secretary King, can you tell us how many times College and Career Ready appears in ESA? And he stopped, and he thought, and he started to answer, and Congressman Bishop said, this may surprise you, it surprised me, 0. He said it had become so toxic, and that the undue influence, all of the members of the committee talked about the undue influence, and some even used coercion of the federal government in the production of the Common Core Standards. It was meaningless relative to limiting a state to any single set of standards. It had become toxic, and so they made sure that it did not appear one single time in ESSA. It might be a good idea to follow the example of ESSA and not use that terminology to promote our new Louisiana standards. I hope BESE supports the continuous review and revision of Louisiana standards until all stakeholders are once again satisfied and their concerns are addressed, and that the implementation is done properly and that the time is taken to get it right. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Nealon?
Thank you, Madam Chair, BESE members, Superintendent White. I'm Bridget Nealon with the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry. We are the State Chamber of Commerce and Manufacturers Association, representing about 3,000 companies with over 90,000 employees in our state. Since 2010, and actually before then, when the development of higher standards began, our board and our Education and Workforce Council has had numerous opportunities to weigh in and express their ideas and opinions about higher standards, and I'm here to report that in every instance there has been unanimous support for rigorous higher standards. Reason being, our members want to hire Louisiana citizens. It is the first preference for any kind of hiring opportunity. Even in an economic downturn that we face, we still have billions of dollars of new investment coming into this state, and somebody will get those jobs, high-paying jobs with benefit. We and our members want those people to be Louisiana citizens. I urge you to accept these standards today. We had an appointed member on the committee, and I am so impressed and so thankful for the commitment and dedication of every member who took the time in addition to their professional careers, to serve on these committees and to serve the public in Louisiana. And I express thanks to them, and I know you all do as well. I think it is time to leave behind the defeatist rhetoric that some children can't learn, that some children can't achieve. I have heard absolutely no compelling reason to not move toward rigorous standards. Can anything always be improved? Of course, and I think you've developed an open process to do that. And again, we work with the legislature, we work with the governor to achieve the highest standards that our children can meet to transform the landscape of Louisiana from one that is thought of only in terms of poverty and low achievement into being the global competitor that we know that we can be. Thank you.
Thank you. Is Jody Benoit here? No. Okay. Angel Maxey, Eric Smith, Dennis Burke, Keith Leger. We'll start on this side.
Oh, thank you. I'm Dennis Burke. I'm a concerned citizen from Jefferson Parish, and thank you for this opportunity. No normal child ever developed dyslexia that was taught to read by phonics-only instruction. Given that, I proposed at a previous BESE meeting that BESE mandate the teaching of reading using phonics-only instruction. No whole word and no mix of whole word and phonics. Mr. Garvey's response to that was, and I quote, "Common Core is a set of standards. Phonics would be an example of how you teach to a standard, and how you teach to a standard BESE has left up to the locals. So your case would be the Jefferson Parish School Board that would decide whether to use phonics or whole word. BESE is leaving it up to them," end quote. It turns out some of the KELA standards are phonics. For example, RFK2B, count, pronounce, blend, and segment syllables in spoken words, and RFK2D, isolate and pronounce the initial, medial, vowel, and final sounds in 3 phoneme words. But some of the KELA standards are whole word or sight word, such as RFK3C, read common high-frequency words by sight. Once again, I make the recommendation that BESE mandate phonics-only reading instruction by way of the new standards. Go through the standards and eliminate anything that is whole word or sight word related. Better yet, incorporate into the standards by reference one of the excellent and proven phonics-only programs that are out there. In doing so, we can finally eradicate artificial dyslexia in Louisiana. Remember, no normal child ever developed dyslexia who was taught to read by phonics-only instruction. And I have one other recommendation. Louisiana's children are its greatest resource. If we are taking their lives and their futures seriously, shouldn't we be doing all we can to ensure our educational standards are the best that they can possibly be? One way of ensuring that is to have the new standards reviewed by nationally acknowledged experts in the fields of mathematics and English language arts. I recommend Professor James T. Milgram for the math and Dr. Sandra Stotsky for ELA. They possess 2 advantages. One is their unquestioned expertise. The other is their well-known and detailed explanations of their solid objections to Common Core. If these standards are not a rebrand of Common Core, and if they are outstanding standards that will pass the review with flying colors, do we want anything less for our children in our state? Thank you.
Thank you. Under 3 minutes.
Got a
Yes,
question?
ma'am. Okay.
Sir, I'm just a little confused. As far as phonics goes,
yes.
Did you find phonics in the standards, and are you in favor of phonics? Are you in favor of whole language combination? I didn't understand what you were saying.
I didn't know I was that unclear. Yes, I quoted a couple of standards that cite phonics. They don't use the P word, but that's exactly what they are. Some are whole word in the standards. Phonics is the only really effective way to teach reading. We've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah, I got you.
And we should continue to do that.
It was probably me that just didn't get what you
No,
said.
whole
Thank
word
you for
is
clarifying
injurious
that.
and actually leads to artificial dyslexia.
Thank you.
Mr. Smith?
Yes, my name is Eric Smith. I was a member of the the 3 through 12 Mathematics Review Subcommittee. I'd like to begin by thanking my fellow subcommittee members for their diligent work over many, many long days, Committee Chair Regina Sanford, and Subcommittee Chair Charlotte Booth for shepherding us through what was an arduous, and for me, a very enlightening experience. I'd like to start by addressing some of the earlier comments, specifically those of the committee members who resigned from the math subcommittee. I can state categorically that we did look at a variety of other state standards, as well as even our own prior GLEs. At the end of the day, what we did as a subcommittee was to revise our existing standards with an eye on those other state standards, with the goal of creating the best standards for Louisiana students. The women and men who worked on crafting and revising our Louisiana math content standards possessed a diverse range of experiences as teachers, leaders, and possessed a wealth of experience in math content areas. I believe over the course of our many, many days of hard work, all of us came to a much more complete understanding of how Louisiana standards we approved work to raise the bar for students of Louisiana. I voted to approve our work, and I stand by it today, and hope that this board votes to approve it as well. With that said, what I would like to add is an encouragement that this board do everything within its power to do a more thorough job of supporting teachers, students, and parents in this and future standard revisions. Before I began my work on the subcommittee, I spent considerable time meeting with other classroom educators and teacher leaders from across the greater New Orleans area. I knew from my own experiences as a classroom teacher under the old GLEs and as a 6 through 12 curriculum director during the multi-year transition to the Common Core standards that there were some problems. Time and time again, what other educators who were unhappy with the Common Core standards expressed to me was less that there were really a myriad of problems with the standards themselves, but that they had been left in the dark during implementation. The constant shifts in deadlines and implementation strategy and a lack of consistency and transparency from the state had left them unprepared to implement the new standards on day one. That same frustration appears in comments from parents over and over. I feel that a lot of the concerns that have been brought up here tonight had little to do with the actual standards, but with assessments, curriculum, pedagogy, all parts of the implementation of those standards, not the standards themselves. I implore this board to do everything that they can to support the implementation of these new Louisiana standards. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Ms. Maxey?
Yes, I'm Angel Maxey, and I'm a second grade teacher in Rapides Parish. I was on the K-2 content subcommittee, and I just want to start by saying thank you for allowing me the opportunity to help shape the future of education in Louisiana. This was a very rewarding process, and we really gave it our all. It was a completely transparent process. We met in all areas of the state. We listened to every single person that came, whether they were for the process or against it. We read every comment that was left on the public portal, and we took those into consideration as we carried out our work, many of which were negative comments, but we took those into consideration as we worked. We scrutinized every single standard from kindergarten through 12th grade, and we made sure they aligned. We tried to look at the big picture and see where we were going and what we were doing, and if I changed one, is it going to affect the grade below or the grade above? And we looked at every single one of those that way. We also looked at standards from other states. We tried to keep our standards with high expectations and very rigorous. There were many tense conversations and discussions about the standards and how they fit into the big picture. We did not take our jobs lightly. Our passion for students and teachers of Louisiana guided our work. As a teacher and as a parent, I hope you'll take all this into consideration as you cast your votes. We were 100% committed to this process and the task that we were given. I, as well as my fellow committee members, stand firmly behind the work that we did. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bofi. To the young man representing Student Council, before you leave, I would get with Superintendent White and get yourself an excuse to show up late to school tomorrow. I'm a retired educator, father of 4 children who have gone through the public school system. and member of the Standards Review Steering Committee. I'd like to first thank the BESE staff, Ms. Shan Davis, and all of the folks who showed up and organized the meetings that were done very professionally. So I sincerely appreciate all the efforts that you all put into that, as well as the Department of Education staff as well. I made it a point to attend as many meetings as I possibly could. I think I missed 2. At every meeting, I witnessed a very inspirational and robust discussion. And this was not just an hour or 2 and let's go back home. The conversations that took place among the committee members was phenomenal. Anyone who would say that this is simply a rebrand is preposterous. After witnessing the process that took place and the scrutiny, every word of every one of those 1,200 plus, almost 1,300 standards was going through with a fine-tooth comb. At this point, I'm excited about where we're heading. I'm encouraged about where we are right now. And I would just like to encourage you all to consider approving these Louisiana state standards, Louisiana student standards, that have Louisiana fingerprints all over them. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Leger. Sean Fleming, Tricia Miller, Teresa Robert, and Christopher Hines. Next up will be Deborah Schoen, Jean Burns, Sarah Vandergriff, and Dr. Raynell Houston. So if you guys want to come to the front row, we'll be as efficient as possible.
Good morning.
It's not morning yet, Mr. Fleming.
Sean Fleming, Louisiana Developmental Disabilities Council. I want to echo what the gentleman in the back with the green plaid said, and I want to phrase it a little different way. I think I looked at the standards. I'm not a standard expert, and I won't pretend to be. But I'll speak to them as they relate to kids with disabilities. And it's not the standards themselves. Teachers don't teach standards. They teach children. The standards, I think, provide a guide to do that, from what I can tell. And I really, every morning I send my kids off to school. And it's not the content that's being taught. It's my children and all the children who are being taught. And so the message I'm getting and the angst about the standards are not about the standards. It's about what's about to happen with the standards. And those come in 2 parts. And it's the end of it, I think, is the crux of it. It's the achievement standards. Because in law, in federal law, they always refer to the content standards and achievement standards, and then they always just say the standards. Well, these content standards that you're looking at are no higher or lower or worse, or they're no higher because there's no way to measure whether they're more or less. They're just different, maybe not as much as some people like, but they're different than what we had last year. What I ask you as we move forward is to ask our Louisiana people to develop the achievement standards. What happened last year was disturbing to me, because the way the achievement standards were set, and that's how far a kid needs to go in order to say they made progress, or not really made progress. The term is whether they learned or not, whether they scored over basic or basic above or master or advanced. All those scores were set by norm referenced measures. They said how many percentages of kids we want to make sure fall in each category. So right now we don't have any criterion to give any guidance for teachers of saying if there are 62 or 63 standards in Algebra 2, then you have to do so much percentage of so many of these standards. There is no guidance towards that end. And that, I think, is what causes people angst. Because that's what people are judged by, it's what schools are judged by, it's what kids end up being judged by. And that's what when we're moving forward, instead of just saying you did a great job and y'all did, I really think they spent a lot of time there. is to ask them to take the next harder step and to give guidance to educators, because the kids that I deal with are not the kids that are going to meet basic all the time. And so we don't want to keep them in a grade when they're, and when we're looking at the overage, you gotta have one more minute, just wrap up. Thank you.
Yeah, 56 seconds.
Thank you. What the teachers have trouble with is when a student comes in and they didn't learn all the standards from the previous grade level. And what do you do with that student? That's what causes angst. That's what causes angst with the student, the teacher, the principal, the parents. And that guidance is what I really recommend y'all push forward and ask the committees to continue to send the message of what to do with all those kids who are, and it's all kids who are across that spectrum. It's just where they are. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Hines?
Thank you. I'm Chris Hines, President of Schools in New Orleans. We support these standards, and I encourage you to adopt them. I very much admire and respect the many excellent and experienced educators who created these standards, and I believe that these are the standards that our students need to master in order to be critical thinking and successful members of society who are ready to succeed in college, career, and to compete with their peers on a global level. Our students across the state of New Orleans, across the state of Louisiana, have shown time and again that when we raise our expectations for them, when we increase the rigor, every time they will rise to the occasion, they will meet these high expectations. These are rigorous standards that demonstrate high expectations for our students, and I encourage you to adopt them.
Thank you. Ma'am?
My name is Tricia Miller. I'm from Calcasieu Parish. I'm asking you as a member of the Standards Review Committee to please take our proposed standards that we're proposing to you this evening and adopt them for Louisiana students. I could go on about all of the work that the committees did and all of the things that went on in the meetings. It was fabulous. I learned a lot. We all worked together. You probably saw me. I was sitting way in the back. Every time someone said something, my head was nodding. So I won't reiterate all of those things, but I will say that what we have now before you this evening are high expectations for students with Louisiana educators and content experts, customizing them for our students. And I think it's would be admirable of you as a state board to approve these standards and validate the work of our committees. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Shum? Dr. Burns, Dr. Houston, Keith Corville, can you come take the extra seat? And then on deck we have Dr. Barrera, Kim Shackelford, and Mallory Wall-Padgett. Sorry, Mallory. You guys are on deck. Can you come to the front row, please? I'm getting ready. It's almost baseball season. Dr. Burns?
My name is Jean Burns. I'm Associate Commissioner for Teacher and Leadership Initiatives for the Louisiana Board of Regents. I'm here on behalf of the Board of Regents to urge you to go ahead and support the standards that are being recommended to you. I also would like to thank BESE for making the decision to have 5 higher education representatives be a part of the steering committee and the subcommittees. This was really a very important movement on your part because it allowed us to be able to be involved right from the very beginning, and I'm going to share with you where we plan on going with our involvement as we go forward within the future. Many of you may not be aware of the fact that the Board of Regents has had a grant from the Court of College grant between 2012 through 2015, and what we did with those funds was we brought together faculty members from our community colleges, from our 4-year institutions, as part of campus leadership teams and with district partners to develop a better understanding of our state content standards and also to provide input into the development of the new PARCC assessments. In addition, they met together in order to take a look at the alignment of the state standards, content standards, to what needed to be occurring within the teacher preparation programs. When we became part of the review process for the standards, we built upon that work. What we ended up doing was we ended up contacting our campus leadership team members. We ended up contacting all of our university chief academic officers for academic affairs who have direct contact with all our colleges of arts and sciences. We were in direct contact with all of our College of Education deans. We provided them with information pertaining to the links that were available for them to provide feedback pertaining to the revisions that were occurring with the state standards. In addition to that, we provided them with the names and the email addresses of all of the higher education representatives that were serving on the review committees, subcommittees, as well as the steering committees. We reached out on 3 different occasions. Once, when they became aware of the fact that they could go to the website in order to provide input into the standards. Second time was when they had the opportunity to take a look at the feedback that had been provided by the public. And the third time that we contacted them was when the standards, the draft standards, were created by the subcommittees and they could go in and provide feedback. We did not get a tremendous amount of feedback from higher education. We did get some. We ended up using that feedback within the subcommittees. But what was really important was we got feedback that higher education was very much in support with the state standards because of the fact that it would prepare students who would come to college ready. We are going to be moving forward, which is why it's very important for you to be making a decision today. All of our colleges of education are planning on moving forward with looking at the alignment of their current curriculum for teachers within our universities. They're going to have that completed by the end of the spring semester. And then in addition to that, we're planning on bringing together our College of Arts and Science faculty responsible for college algebra, as well as our College of Education faculty, to really take a look at the new standards for math and to take a look at what we need to do in order to align expectations in high school to what students need to do in college algebra. So we really encourage you to move forward, vote on this evening, so that we can move forward.
You are going over. Dr. Houston.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm Dr. Raynell Houston. I served as a member of the steering committee. I was a parent representative for the Black Alliance for Educational Options. I am a mom. I have 2 girls who recently completed high school and who were adequately prepared for college. They graduated from public high school in Plaquemines Parish. I also have an 8-year-old daughter who happens to have Down syndrome, and she is a student in public school in Belle Chase as well. Professionally, I'm an educator. I taught 1st grade. I taught middle school ELA. I taught at the college level at Our Lady of Holy Cross College for about 10 years, and I also taught at Southeastern in the Department of Teaching and Learning. Currently, I'm an associate superintendent in the Office of Catholic Schools in the Archdiocese of New Orleans. So I come to this committee as an educator. I work side by side with my peers, and I'm happy to say that I'm proud of the work that they have done, that we have done, and that we present to you tonight. I'm confident in the quality of the work, and I hope that you vote to accept our recommendation.
Thank you. Go for it.
Okay. I just want to say I'm so happy to be here. And I waited 8 hours to get to this point.
And do you see how attentive my board members are? I'm impressed. I want to just say how impressed I am. They're leaning in.
Yeah,
do you see them leaning
I want
in?
to start it right. But I just want to say, my name is Deborah Shum. I am the Executive Director for Louisiana Association of Principals, and I represent that group as much as I can. My past history has been as a math high school teacher, a principal, an assistant principal, a curriculum director, chief academic officer, and I worked as a deputy superintendent for the State Department of Education. So I come with a lot of background and experience in working with what works in schools and with teachers and with principals. And I want to say that the committee has done a great job in getting the work complete. And I want to talk about, there's 3 recommendations that they made in addition to the standards. And one says that in addition to the standards, that there should be a strategic communication that involves all stakeholders, inclusive of parents, and clearly articulating the new standards and what they mean to the citizens of Louisiana. And I want to just harp on that for a minute, because I think we have a chance to get it right this time. I think that the standards were taken in by the people in Louisiana. It was by educators in Louisiana. It was by teachers, principals, people who are respected in the profession. And I think we will do a disservice to the work they have done if we are not careful about the implementation timeline. And I say that with all due respect, that the implementation timeline was stated that it would be 2016-17, and I think we're going to make a mistake if we don't make sure that we put all of those pieces that this committee spoke about, to make sure that we provide support to teachers and guidance to them, to make sure that we have professional development that goes with them. So when you adopt the standards, I just want to make sure that we are looking at that implementation timeline, because in any case, when I visited classrooms, when I visited teachers, when I talked with principals, the whole issue was never really about the specific standards. It was about how we got the information to people. And I have a daughter.
Ms. Shum, in the spirit of treating everyone fairly, I cut someone off who went off on implementation as opposed to talking about the standards that our board members are considering tonight.
Right, and I'm speaking from the documentation, and I'm just going to add, the documentation that you had on this list said that in ELA and math, that 18% of the standards changed in ELA, 26% of the standards changed in math. And that's from the documentation from this particular item. But I'm saying that because if that much changed, then we need to make sure that we provide the correct timeline for implementing with the professional development and making sure that parents know those standards and the amount of time that goes into them.
Thank you. And we are going to lean on your organization and others to help us with those communications. Mr. Corville, Dr. Corville.
Hey, thank you, Dr. Volpe. How y'all doing tonight? I'm Keith Corville.
Do not answer that, board members.
Yeah.
Do not answer that.
I'm Keith Corville, Executive Director of the Associated Professional Educators of Louisiana, a nonpartisan, non-union association for teachers. And, just to start out, I'm going to tell you that we need to move forward, because I swear from my mental capacity, I can't take another year of conspiracy theories and excuses about implementation. There. So, going off.
Does that conclude your remarks?
You know what? I always keep it short and sweet, so here's a few more sentences. Our teachers are great, and I don't care what people's politics are, but we have great teachers that got together, worked hard, and developed great standards. There's standards by Louisiana teachers, for Louisiana teachers, and they're going to do a good job in the classroom. Let's start it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Shackelfield Ford, you guys know who you are. Thank you. I'm sorry about that.
Coordinate state and federal programs. I'm instructional support for curriculum instruction assessment for 15 schools in our school district and coordinate 34 teacher leaders. I have taught with goals. I have taught with learning targets. I have taught with objectives. I have worked on the original GLEs, and I look forward to working on Louisiana state standards. It's not about a label. It's about teaching reading, literature, writing, expression, vocabulary development, conceptual understanding, procedural skill, and application in mathematics. Since August, I have served on this 26-member steering committee, and I've been down in the trenches with K through 2 subcommittee with ELA and math standards. We have studied 854 ELA standards and 433 math standards across kindergarten K through 12. I've carried standards in my bag everywhere I've gone. Within the review process, I took the public comments. I printed out every Excel spreadsheet. We studied those standards. We marked what was recommended, the recommended changes, the wording, the deletions, the movements, and we discussed all of those things. Within public comments and open meetings, we took every recommendation from the public. I took notes, we read, and we studied independently. any materials that were suggested, any emails sent to my personal email account, to my work account, were read and reviewed if they related to the standard development. I believe that our work is divine, what Louisiana students really have to know and be able to do. It was such a great pleasure to work with 30 parishes from the north, to travel anywhere in a congressional district and work with 30 parishes. I believe that there were educators to my right and left that had expertise from the Board of Regents, higher education, early education, and special education. I feel like we read the standards and studied them by grade level, grade spans, across grade spans. We even sat one day for 8 hours and read every standard from kindergarten to first grade to second grade to make sure they were a fluent progression of learning. I thank you for listening to me, and I would want to leave you with research from Robert Marzano. The starting place of all effective instruction is designing and communicating clear learning goals. Lincoln Parish, the teachers, and myself have great hope that you're going to approve these standards, that the legislature is going to review these standards, and the governor will accept these standards, because we're ready to move on. We're ready for your vote of support for the revised state standards and move forward and focus on effective instruction.
Thank you.
Hello, or not?
The green light needs to be on, and you pull it close.
Okay, thank you.
Good job.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Stan Barrera, and I am an assistant professor of literacy here at LSU in Baton Rouge. I have a bachelor's in bilingual education. I have a master's in curriculum and instruction. I have another master's in ed administration and superintendent certification out of Texas. Like I said, I'm currently an assistant professor here of literacy. That is my field. My PhD is in reading, and I full-heartedly stand behind the standards that are being presented to you all today. We did spend an unbelievable amount of time working towards them as a group. I was actually really impressed with the process. I was amazed at the fact that we could have 29 teachers in a room agreeing on standards, regardless of whether they were teaching from kinder or from 12th grade, and to get feedback from 12th grade teachers on the standards that we were proposing for 3rd grade was amazing, and vice versa, to hear those things. And also, one of the things that I found most interesting as someone who has taught elementary and now currently teaches at the university level, I could see that we were preparing our young children to go to college, because I was able to understand what the young children need based on my experience as a teacher, but I also could see what our college students needed. And I can tell you that the revisions that were made were with the best intent for the children of Louisiana. And I just really hope that you'll take all that into consideration today as you consider what is being proposed to you all. Thank you. Oh, wait, I do want to say one more thing. Phonics is not the right way and the only way to teach reading. I could not believe that was even said here by someone who has no background in reading. So it's not the only way. In fact, it's one of the worst things, because it does not address comprehension. And what good does it do to be able to read words when you do not know what they mean? And so I just need to end with that. Thank you.
Miss Mallory Wall-Paget, I'd like to recognize that you represented some work that we're doing with educator preparation at the beginning of the week at a policy forum that we had here. And so on behalf of the board, I'd like to thank you for the work that you're doing there, and go ahead and let you give your comments.
I just became acutely aware that I'm like the only thing standing between you guys and a vote, so I'm going to be very brief. I want to make, and like these people and going home, so that's even more important. I want to make the point, it was mentioned earlier that we need more classical literature. I want to emphasize that as a high school English teacher, I do teach classical literature. These standards do provide me the autonomy that I need to be able to teach classical literature and blend in those informational texts in a way that's meaningful. Just to give you a really quick, concrete example, right now we're reading The Tragedy of Macbeth by William Shakespeare, which I think we can all agree is classical literature, and the students are also reading Poetics from Aristotle. And they're also reading some literary criticism of Shakespeare. So it's very seamless and easy to fold those pieces in, and these standards allow for that to happen. So please know that. What we as teachers need more than anything from you is continuity and stability. We need to know the rules of the game when we go into the game. And we have put so much time and energy into raising the bar for our students, and they can do this work. I have never put something in front of my students that they haven't eventually been able to master and been so proud of themselves for doing so. I am truly humbled by the work of these committees. It is an absolute honor to be in the same profession as you guys. I can't express that enough. And I want to echo what Ms. Burns said about teacher preparation. Like Dr. Bofey said, I'm a Believe in Prepare mentor. So another part of my work is working with pre-service teachers. And as important as it is for our students to have a firm path forward, it is equally important for our future teachers to have that firm path forward. And I would like just to ask you to honor the work of these committees and honor the potential of every student and every teacher in this state, and give us these standards and let us do the magic. Let us make it work. Thank you. We will not let you down.
Thank you. Board members, that concludes our public comment. I appreciate you holding your questions to the end. We do have the members of the committees, the chairs of the committees that are still here if you have specific questions for them. So I am ready to recognize you. Yes, Mr. Garvey.
I have some questions.
Okay.
Surprise. I will try to keep them short. So if we could get
the chairs of the committees to come forward, please.
Chairs to come down.
I will warn you that Mr. Garvey likes to take part in some interesting questioning.
Not usually at 9 o'clock at night, though. And I was going to warn them ahead of time too, and Ms. Sanford in particular, because most of my questions I think will go to her. But I will try to keep them short and on
what?
Deposition, like on attorney, like. And I was going to ask Ms. DeFelice to come down, but it looks like she left. But she made some comments about some changes that she thought should have been made that were not made, that left holes in the standards. Do you understand what it is that she's talking about, what holes might be in the standards?
There were a couple of issues raised, and I wanted the opportunity to clarify. We had a work group on one of our meetings, and we did not have a quorum. We were at a standstill. So some of the questions that were raised by committee members, we could not answer about the shifts in geometry. So that is why we did reach out to get some clarification. And I'm going to ask Ms. Booth to address those specific nuances of the math.
I can't speak specifically to a skill or a standard, but I think one of the great things about our standards, or even the past standards, was that let me say it this way. If you have one of our standards and it requires that you teach an isolated skill in the context of that standard, then you know you have to teach that skill. It was, I think, a general consensus of the committee that we didn't want standards that isolated skills, much like our GLEs did in the past. So I wish I could give you a specific example, but if you were going to teach slope, there may be isolated skills that would get you to that slope sounds like an isolated skill. But if you were to teach a standard that addressed slope or linear relationships, you would just know to teach. They had to have that to reach that expectation stated by the standard. And if we wrote a standard for every isolated skill, we would end up with so many standards And so her committee did look at her recommendations after she left and considered her work in their work. I do know that because I was there. But I think that was the main consensus of the committee. We could not write a standard for every individual skill.
Well, let me rephrase it another way. Do you know of anything math-related that's on the ACT that is not covered by the proposed standard?
I cannot answer that question for you. I cannot. I did not hear that from any of. Yeah, I did not hear that from any of the committee members in our work.
Can answer, please.
Yeah, I wish we had
put
one of
them
our
in contact
husbands. Yeah,
with me.
I will. I'll do that.
Because my understanding is that we may be doing some of this on a much smaller scale next year to fix any holes if there are any. And I'd like to know what they might be.
I will.
There was also described that there was an attempt on one of the very first days to expand the committee by adding advisors, college advisors, or to add members to it. And then maybe that was, after voted down, it was switched to add people as advisors and maybe add them as semi-committee members.
We said at that meeting that we would reach out to our university professionals to make sure that they were included, because the comment was that they wanted to add members from the university to the committee. We did not feel that that was our charge to add, because you selected us to serve.
And on the day when there was a meeting and some college professors were present,
yes.
On that day, were they added to the committee?
No,
or
sir.
Were they just there to answer questions?
They were there to answer questions.
And give information.
And give clarification, because we were at a standstill and we needed some content expertise. We did not have a quorum, nor did we take a vote.
So it was very different from what was proposed on the first day?
Yes.
Okay. Great, thank you. Does the content standards that are being proposed, do they prohibit cursive writing in the schools?
No, sir. And I went back and actually took a look at some GLEs. And if you will, I will answer that question. There were 2 original GLEs, and they were for ELA grade 3. And I would like the opportunity to read these. The GLE 27 said, write legibly in standard cursive or printed form, indenting paragraphs appropriately, using standard margins, and demonstrating fluency. So the way that that original GLE was stated, the student would use either or. Many of the early grade level teachers still teach cursive writing. We strongly think that is very positive, but there was not a standard originally that said teach the skill of cursive writing. GLE 28 also said write legibly in cursive or printed form using standard margins and demonstrating appropriate spacing of letters, words, sentences, etc. So again, the student had the option and the teacher could grade appropriately in using the student's information in either cursive or printed. And to my delving down, those were the only 2 standards originally, GLEs, that even included cursive.
And they
so we
didn't
think
require cursive.
it was not required. It's an or. And we feel that that is still a district decision.
Okay. During some of the testimony today and earlier, I heard some claims that this committee or committees were stacked with pro-Common Core members. And I pointed out to some of the newspapers that when BESE was forming these committees, we took suggestions from the local school boards as to who they thought would be good members. And I think 90-something% of the members that we put on these committees came from those recommendations. And the thought was that the local school boards were taking the brunt of the complaints about the Common Core standards, and so it would be good to know who should be put on these committees to make necessary changes to put a good set of standards in place. in the process, did you get any resolutions from any school boards saying that their local employee who may have been on the committee was too pro Common Core or not anti-Common Core enough?
No, sir. Mr. Garvey, I will tell you that as a committee member, I reached out to my teachers and I said, give me information. Of course, any time that you're a member of a committee, you have to do a lot of give and take. I walked into the committee with a lot of notes from teachers from my staff, and after hearing conversations, I then changed my mind. I walked in with a slash and burn attitude. So in no way would I have been branded a Common Core advocate, but I was asked many times, take a stance, take a stance. I didn't feel strongly one way or another about taking a stance, because it really is not about whether you're for or against. It's truly about teaching and learning and what's best for kids. So if you really look at the standards, I believe that they represent a lot of information that our teachers traditionally have taught in their classrooms. So in working on the committee, I had to do a lot of give and take personally, and I will say that many of my colleagues did the same, because we truly looked at every individual standard. And it's very hard to make a change in one grade level without looking below and looking above to make sure that you have that vertical alignment.
And so, just to be clear, you did not get any resolutions from school
I
boards?
did not receive any.
Okay. And this is the last one, I think. Do you think that this is a substantial improvement from that the proposed new standards are a substantial improvement from the Common Core standards?
I believe that this process validates that our Louisiana educators want consistency, and this represents quality instruction. Our students in Louisiana deserve to compete regionally, statewide, nationally, or even globally. So if Louisiana lowers the bar, then we are going to be branded as not having the rigor that other states have. And I believe that our students can rise to the occasion, and I have complete confidence that our teachers are providing the best instruction possible. And I hear that over and over throughout the state as I have many different meetings, and many of the superintendents believe the same.
And so do you think this is a substantial improvement, or do you not want to make that statement?
I believe that this is an improvement, because without our review of the individual standards, we would still have much of the controversy. And I understand that not always are you going to get 100% buy-in. That's just the way things work. So I respect all of the people who have come to voice their opposition against, because I believe that as part of a committee membership, we should be willing to listen. And I believe that we have. Some of the issues that have been raised to committee members are not about the standards. They're about implementation, they're about curriculum, and they're about textbooks. We weren't charged with that task. You charged us with the task of reviewing the standards. So for us to complete the work, we put in the sweat equity that it took. But I would dare say that none of us could have taken all of the standards and rewritten every single one, because these standards were written by professionals. And not all teachers have that kind of expertise and background. So I strongly support the work that we have done, and I believe that our teachers, given the time, opportunity, as well as the students' sweat equity, we will rise to the occasion.
Thank you.
Ms. Edmonston?
Regina, I commend you and all of your leaders here and all of the 100 people that were on the committee. I love our teachers. I think y'all are amazing. I think y'all have done a wonderful job at this. I think our teachers every day across the state do a great job. I feel like we need to support them more, and that's what I want to do. Having said that, I have my own issues with Common Core, and I would like for y'all to realize it has absolutely nothing to do with y'all. When I went to the last committee meeting, you were graciously answered every question I had, and I just want you to know that I really appreciate what y'all have done. You've done an amazing job, and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Board members, is there anyone else who has questions?
Well,
Okay.
I do have a question, Holly. If I
Oh,
can.
okay.
Spelling is spelling. Tell us about spelling.
Spelling is consistently throughout K through 12, and I will tell you that I was one of the people who said I don't believe that our seniors need spelling as a standard, but I was voted down, and I'm okay with that.
Okay. So you were basically wondering the same thing I was, is where were we saying you had to be able to spell? But we just go every year and do
every
that?
year spelling
Do we
is
ever
addressed.
master it?
Do we ever master it? That's a good
As
question.
with
There
the
are words I
standards,
cannot
you and I
spell.
mastered it. So not really, yeah. Okay. Wait just a second so I don't have to ask again. I have a concern about the makeup of the committee, in that I feel like we did not have enough parents. That has nothing to do with y'all. Y'all were asked and you got on, just for your information. Phonics is a part of the standards. That was something that I was not sure about. Correct? Yes, correct. Okay, good.
It's within the reading foundations, and
Okay.
that's what it's.
Right.
It is under that standard.
Okay. Another issue that I have, and I know that there were experts, but developmentally appropriate process, I just feel like early on, I'm not in agreement. But again, that has nothing to do with y'all, so I appreciate it. I think that might be it for me.
Okay, Dr. Jones. I believe you had a comment?
I did. First of all, have y'all ever considered portalets for these?
Dr. Jones, it's late.
All right.
Get to the point.
And due to the lateness of the hour, I would love to say a whole lot more than what I'm going to say on this. I just have to say, I came on BESE with one thing in mind, and that's what's best for kids of Louisiana. Nothing else. No politics. I don't care about Common Core, Apple Core, any kind of core. I care about one thing, and that's kids. Okay. And so what I've got, and I've only been in education 45 years, and I realize I'm a rookie. I taught high school and junior high school English and history. I wouldn't dare to substitute my judgment for the work of these folks right here, because I have to tell you, anytime you get a committee together, you have dissension, and you have friction, and friction makes heat, and heat makes light. And it's time for us to light the light bulb. It's time for us to get on with this. These kids need to know what the expectations are. These teachers need to know what it is they're supposed to teach to make sure it gets there. And somehow the idea seems to be out there that these things are cast in concrete, that once they're done forever. Education is not a standstill process. We always review things, and we always change. And if at the end of the day y'all screwed up and missed something, I'm sure we'll tell you about it next year, and we'll fix it. But I just have to say, I think it's time for us to get some standards and move on.
Thank you. Ms. Boche?
And I'm going to try to make my comments as short as I can. First of all, Dr. Sanford and the entire committee, I have tremendous respect for each and every one of you, and the graciousness and the professionalism with which you have handled this chairmanship is just beyond reproach. You've done a magnificent job. The format, the formation of these committees, we have over 100 educators statewide from every school district in the state, every parish. We've got university representation. I wish we had, Dr. Burns, I wish we had a little bit more, because part of my concern is that we do have that alignment, and that we do have our university professionals taking a look at it and saying, yes, we believe this will make our children college ready for those who are taking that particular pathway. I think the people who agreed to serve on this, there were some who came in a pro-Common Core fashion, an anti-Common Core fashion. I know the people who were on the committee from my district went in with an open mind, and just as Dr. Sanford did, as she communicated and spoke with the educators within her district, so did those within my district who were on the different committees. So it wasn't one single educator's thoughts, ideas, and beliefs. They were also charged to go back. They went into their communities. They went into their school districts. They talked with a vast number of educators within their districts and brought that to the committee. So I cannot say enough about the work that y'all have done. And I'm going to, you know, when we take this vote, I absolutely support that initiative. But I do want to say, and you know, when Mr. Lejeune was up talking in terms of implementation, and some other people as well, that it is germane to this issue in some regard, because we have to have in the future, not tonight, but a discussion in terms of the implementation. I know when your committee presented to the superintendents, one of the major recommendations, echoed definitely and supported by the superintendents, was that what we have to do, and anybody familiar with a long-term implementation of any major initiative, whether it's in education, business, or whatever, you've got to make sure all the resources are available, that the people are trained. I hear from teacher after teacher after teacher that we need to make sure that those guidebooks, the assessment guides, the crosswalk documents, whatever we're going to have available is ready to go when we decide to implement this, and that they be well trained. That's the comfort. The gentleman in the back who's on the committee, you know, I jotted down his statement. We have to do a more thorough job of supporting teachers and parents with this implementation. From another lady on the committee, what teachers need is continuity and stability. The parent from Calcasieu, who I don't know names, but you know, he said we need stability in this process. And if we want the process to be successful, the education stakeholders in this state have to get together and agree upon a thoughtful, reasonable, and thorough implementation of whatever standards are ultimately approved, not only by BESE, but the legislature, the governor, and when we finally get through this whole APA process, which will be sometime in the summer, that the documents that the teachers need and that the parents should have available to them are ready to go, that the training has been done, because getting an assessment guide in the middle of the year does not do that teacher any good on day one. So that is a very, very real issue. And if we want this whole process to be successful, then we have to make sure that that work is done on the front end, so that our frontline educators are walking into those classrooms knowing what the standards are, what they mean, trained in implementation, documents ready, and what's going to be assessed. And I think at some point, it's not the issue of the standards as much as what a lot of the other people have said, the assessments, the curriculum that you choose, the materials. And then even to Mr. Fleming's point, the degree of achievement and levels of achievement from all of our students in terms of either complete mastery or growth. And those, it's not for tonight, I understand that. So I'm definitely going to be in support of approving the work that your committee has done, and with a caution to everyone involved in this process, if we want it to be successful, and we want buy-in from our parents, our teachers, and the stakeholders in this state, we have to listen to everyone and make sure that we're ready to go and do this in a very thoughtful and professional and reasonable manner to ensure success of a long-term implementation.
Yes, Ms. Holloway.
Thank you. I'm so sorry. Thank you. Outstanding job. But I want to pass my minutes to Andrew. Okay, Andrew, please.
As a high-performing student, I think it's very important for students in the state to have high standards to compete on the state, national, and international level. And I'd like to thank y'all for all your hard work and everybody else who's done it to help the students in the state.
Do any other board members have comments or questions?
I have comments.
Yes, sir.
I want to thank each of you for all the hours, 9,000 hours, at least 40 hours each, time 100 members. I expect that if these standards go into effect, that students will be better prepared for college. And I appreciate your diligence, being able to work together, the perseverance, and we're looking forward to having a better day in Louisiana. Thank you.
Mr. Rock?
I agree, and thank you, ladies, for a job well done. A lot of long, hard hours across the state. I commend you for that, and I'm very, very supportive. And I love a lot. I'm not going to say a lot what Doris said, but I agree as we move forward with implementation and all. Thanks again for a job well done.
I would like to echo their gratitude. Thank you very much for all you've done. Board members, is there any objection to the motion?
I object.
Hearing one objection. Any others? Motion passes. This adjourns our meeting.